more than an address or a structure. A home is the building block of family and society that gathers us and holds us together, no matter where we're from. We open the door and feel secure in our place in the community, in our country. Your own apartment, your own home, your own place to make memories, take comfort, and build a better future. It is a powerful ideal that is linked by the strongest of bonds to our identity as a nation. That's why for more than 70 years, no single organization has been more fundamental to building an inclusive housing system than Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. From the biggest cities to the smallest towns of this vast country, housing matters to all Canadians. Helping Canadians meet their housing needs is what we do. Our nationally available mortgage loan insurance facilitates access to rental housing and allows qualified Canadians to become homeowners. Just as important is ensuring our lenders have reliable access to funds, providing more choices for Canadians to find a mortgage, no matter where they live. That's good for the homebuyer, for our housing system, and for the financial stability of our country. When it comes to opening doors for Canadians, our people are at the forefront, offering support, guidance, and expertise in the field, and creating comprehensive tools and resources for housing sector professionals. The research we do and the data we collect and analyze allows us to provide unrivaled insight to an evolving marketplace. It helps mortgage professionals become more informed about what their clients want and expect. It allows developers to supply properties that meet those demands, and it informs decisions by all levels of government on policy and investment in Canada's housing market. We know adequate housing creates the conditions for success. Working with our partners, we help support affordable housing for all Canadians, including seniors, Indigenous, low-income households, and other vulnerable people in Canada. Our quality of life is considered one of the best in the world. It's no accident that Canada's housing system is held up as an example of what we can all accomplish when we use innovation and passion to keep moving forward. Home is at the heart of our country. For many Canadians, it starts with us.
Maintaining your home takes a little more effort than a coat of paint or a weekly lawn mow in the summer. It costs money to maintain it and takes energy to run it. Think of all the different places that energy goes, like running your fridge or heating your water. How do you maximize efficiency and get the best value? It starts by choosing the right energy for the right use. And using electricity and natural gas in the right places provides an equal combination of that comfort, convenience, and efficiency. Burgers on the grill? With natural gas, you'll never have to lift a heavy propane tank again or worry about running out of fuel. With natural gas, you have so many choices. It starts when you choose to include it as part of a balanced energy mix.
Nearly every day we access global information. We also want to communicate, connect, and be entertained. Speed makes a world of difference. The revolutionary TELUS Pure Fiber network delivers the lightning-fast access you crave. Fiberglass strands transport information close to the speed of light, and with more than enough bandwidth for you and your neighbors, you'll have reliable, instant access anytime you want.
TELUS Pure Fiber allows me to upload just as fast as I can download. It allows me to keep in touch with my very international family. It allows me to work from home and video conference with colleagues and clients from all over the world.
Being on the Strata, my thing from the building perspective is that we're set up for the future. So no matter where technology goes, whether we're going to be streaming a lot and using a lot more data, we have the infrastructure in place for years and years to come. We won't have to change anything for decades.
I'd recommend TELUS. It's all just been pick up the phone, call your rep, they deal with it. The technical side gets dealt with, and then the construction side gets dealt with.
Future-proof technologies within our buildings will allow all our users to access all the applications and all the new technologies that are coming forward in various ways and in ways that we haven't even thought of yet.
Unleash the value of fiber to the home with the TELUS Pure Fiber network. Get connected today.
Whoops. Are we ready, Don? Yes? Hello, and welcome to the 23rd Annual Homebuyer Forum and tonight's panel discussion, Getting Ready to Buy. My name is Bob DeWitt. I'm the CEO of the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association. The GVHBA is a not-for-profit organization that has 1,000 member companies, including developers, builders, renovators, tradespeople, suppliers, government agencies, architects, designers, and other building professionals involved in the residential construction industry. In addition to interacting with our industry members, we actively engage with the 21 cities of Metro Vancouver and various provincial and federal government policymakers and agencies on a variety of issues important to our members and to you, the home buyer. Most recently, we worked as part of the Surrey School Coalition, which ultimately led to the raising of $217 million in taxpayer money to help the city's public schools keep up with residential growth. We also host events and seminars like this one to help consumers with all stages of the home buying, building, or renovating process. It's great to see so many of you out here tonight and online to learn about the many facets of home buying. I'd also like to acknowledge our online viewers and thank you for registering. For those of you attending in person, included in your consumer bag tonight, hot off the presses, is a copy of our 2017 contact directory, which lists our members and contains a wealth of resources and information on who we are and what we do for our members and for consumers. Online viewers interested in getting a copy can email us at info@gvhba.org and we'll send you a copy. It's also available on our website. It's with the generous support of our sponsors that we're able to offer this popular event free of charge. I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to the impressive group of sponsors and media partners that have made this event possible. Our presenting sponsor is BC Housing. Our speaker sponsors are Fortis BC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, and the Condominium Homeowners Association. Also, our media sponsors, the Vancouver Sun and the Province, Glacier Media Group and Real Estate Weekly, Black Press, Yellow Pages Next Home, New Home, and Condo Guide. And I'd like to now introduce our moderator for the Getting Ready to Buy panel. That is Shane Ramsey, the CEO of BC Housing. As CEO of BC Housing, Shane is responsible for the delivery of a wide range of housing programs and services. No longer just a provider of housing for low-income British Columbians, BC Housing has expanded its mandate during Shane's 15 years in the role to include other responsibilities, including licensing residential builders, home warranty insurance, and housing-related research and education. In addition to his work with BC Housing, Shane is currently chair of the International Housing Partnership, an international organization created to share innovative strategies for the development, operation, and sustainability of social housing around the world. The IHP currently comprises 175 member groups from Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, and the United States. Shane also chairs Housing Partnership Canada, which is a member of the International Housing Partnership and also focuses on collaborative solutions and shared experiences in social housing. Please join me in welcoming Shane. Thank you, Shane.
Okay. Thanks, Bob, and welcome to everyone attending tonight's seminar. Really a great opportunity for you to interact with a series of professionals over the 3 panels that we have and get the questions answered. Also, our panelists will be out at the marketplace during the break, so you can also connect with them as well. The format for tonight's session is I'll briefly introduce each panelist, then ask them probably 1 or 2 questions each, and then we'll turn it over to you to ask your questions. And for those online, please be sure to type your questions into the chat room provided in the sidebar on your screen, and we will do our best to answer your questions when we go to the Q&A period. So our panelists tonight, Robin Adamach. Robin is the Principal Market Analysis for the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. She is responsible for analyzing the province's largest housing market and supervising a team of analysts. Robin is CMHC spokesperson on the Metro Vancouver housing market, providing commentary on developments in the resale, rental, and new home markets. Lisa Aragorn from Bridgestone Financing Pros, mortgage and leasing experts. Lisa is a go-to expert for your financing needs, whether a first-time home buyer or an established business looking to grow. With more than 15 years in the real estate industry, Lisa obtained her mortgage license from the University of British Columbia and started her own business in 2011. She recently established Bridgestone Financing Pros with Dominion Lending Center's Mountain View Limited. Dan Maxwell on my far right. Dan is the Chief Financial Officer for BC Housing. He has been with us for more than 20 years. He is a chartered accountant and holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of British Columbia. Dan has also practiced in the industry as a chartered accountant and for the Office of the Comptroller General and as their Director of Internal Audit. Dan's here tonight to answer questions about the recently introduced BC Home program. And finally, Brad Ricketts. Brad is the Energy Solutions Manager for Fortis BC, and he is that manager for new and residential commercial markets. His focus is on helping builders and developers find the right thermal solutions for their products and to create greater awareness of the benefits of natural gas, including comfort, efficiency, lifestyle, and affordability. RBC has kindly provided notes and pens found in your consumer bag, so if you have questions, please make sure you write them down, and we'll turn it over to you in a few minutes. So first, I'd like to begin with Robin, and a question around the Vancouver housing market. What factors are currently influencing the market, and what is CMHC's outlook for the Vancouver housing market for 2017 and 2018?
Great. Thanks, Shane. Well, at the risk of starting off and having this sound like you're attending an Econ 101 class here at SFU, which I may have done myself, there are a couple of demand factors and a couple of supply factors, I think, that need to be spoken of here. On the demand side, low mortgage rates continue and are expected to continue through 2017 and 2018. We're likely to see some small increases in mortgage rates, but nothing too substantial, so this should support home buying going forward. As well, BC and particularly Vancouver has really been leading the country as a whole in terms of job growth over the past year and a half or so. So that's one of the other things really supporting housing demand, as well as lots of people moving here. As you probably know, our rate of natural increase in terms of the population is fairly low, but because we have lots of people moving here, both from other countries and from other provinces, that's one of the other factors that's really supporting housing demand going forward. And these factors are expected to stay strong both this year and next year. However, we probably won't see quite as hot of a market as we have seen over the past year and a half or so. And the reason for that is because the market is currently adjusting to some of the policy changes that have been taking place, as well as some uncertainties in the market, and some imbalances that have been identified in various housing markets, including Vancouver, of course. And then on the supply side, both in the new home market and on the resale market, we've been facing very, very low levels of supply for some time. And this is expected, hopefully, to ease soon, but this is a very hard variable to forecast. In terms of the resale market, we've been really at record low levels of supply, and this is part of what's behind the strong price growth that we've seen. So these supply levels, both in the new home market, low inventories of unsold brand new homes, and low inventories of resale listings, combined with these strong demand factors, should keep the housing market ticking along quite nicely, although probably at a little bit of a more normal pace than what we've seen in 2015 and 2016.
Robin, do you have any thoughts on, you hear a lot of pundits talking about, price adjustments and bubble and that sort of thing. Can you just take a minute or so just to talk about that?
Absolutely. Because of those factors I just discussed, that strong demand, and that is forecast to continue, as well as a relatively low supply, which is hard to add to in a wholesale way. Certainly the supply will slowly come up again, But because of that, we don't expect that prices will have any significant correction anytime soon. Our range forecast for prices going forward is somewhere between a 5% gain in prices to possibly a 5% decline in prices. But do keep in mind that prices in Vancouver are notoriously sticky on the way down. So even in 2008, 2009, we did see prices decline about 15%, but then within about 9 months, they were right back up to their previous peak again. So if you're waiting for the market for prices to fall, it's one consideration, but not one that I would be personally betting on right now.
Great, thank you, Robin. Maybe I'll turn to Elisa now. You often hear the terms pre-approved and pre-qualification. Can you explain the difference between the two terminologies and their importance to a first-time buyer? And maybe also talk about the importance of interest rate considerations.
Sure. So let's talk about pre-approval first. Pre-approval is when you actually go to the lender and pretty well ask them how much you qualify for. The reality is the lenders don't underwrite the file, which means they're not looking at your income, they're not really looking at the credit. It's just very quick glance through the application and then tell you how much you actually kind of qualify for. But the reality is just a rate hold. That's the only thing that it is. When you're looking at actually getting pre-qualified, it means that they're actually reviewing income confirmation. They're checking job letters, pay stubs, as well as they're looking at your credit to see if there's any concerns or any issues. The down payment, so they do look at the application a lot more thorough and be able to give you some calculations at what you actually kind of qualify for. So those are some of the things. When you mention about interest rates, that is what we actually most hear about. Oh, interest rates are going down, interest rates are going up. The reality is, it's not only about the rate, it's actually finding the best mortgage with the best rates and the best terms. If you only focus on the rate, there's a lot of things that down the road can actually cost you a lot more money. One of those things that is important to consider is how is the mortgage actually registered? Mortgages are actually registered either conventional or standard or collateral. So when it's conventional, it means that you're actually, for example, if your mortgage is $100,000, they're going to register it for $100,000. If your mortgage is registered collateral, they will, if your mortgage is $100,000, they will register it for $150,000. Normally, the lender says is if it gives you the ability, if you want to refinance or you want to do something, you don't have to kind of go through the whole process again. The reality is you actually do have to requalify to get a higher amount. And when your term finishes, if you decide to move to a different lender, if it's registered collateral, you're going to actually have to pay legal fees. If it's registered regularly, you don't. So that's one of the things that you look at, and as well as how the penalties are calculated. That's a huge one that a lot of people don't really realize about. Depending on the lender and which lender holds your mortgage, when you see your mortgage interest rates, some lenders said, this is your posted rate minus the discount, and this is your contract rate. So that is the rate that you're going to be paying when you're actually, that's going to be, your mortgage payments are going to be based on that. However, if for some reason you decide to terminate or sell your home before the end of the term, or something happens, or you want to refinance before the end of the term, then they will actually calculate, some lenders will calculate it based on the actual posted rate, not what actually rate you're paying. So that's why there's huge differences on how you actually, whether one lender you might end up getting a $15,000 penalty, while if you're with another lender it might be $4,000. So that's how normally penalties are calculated, and normally is either the greater of the interest rate differential, which means whatever rate you have compared to what's left on the term and whatever the existing rate is. And then, or 3-month penalty and interest. That's if it's a fixed rate. Sorry, there's a lot of information here. So that's usually how penalties are calculated if you're on a fixed term. If it's based on a variable term, then it's actually calculated on the 3-month penalty interest. So.
Great. You mentioned when you get pre-approval, there is a rate hold. How long does a financial institution typically allow the or hold the rate for the home buyer?
Depend on the lender, but it's anywhere between 90 days to 120 days.
Great, thanks. Just last month, or in January, sorry, I guess today's March the 1st, in January, the provincial government introduced a new down payment assistance program called the BC Home Program. That's actually administered by BC Housing, and Dan is responsible for the administration of that program. Maybe you could just describe in general terms, Dan, what that program does and what type of assistance is available for first-time buyers.
Sure. So if you're a first-time home buyer and you're somebody who's able to afford a mortgage to buy a home, but you haven't saved all the down payment that you need to be able to make that purchase, this is a program that can help you. So this program will provide a loan that's interest-free and payment-free for the first 5 years, and it will match dollar for dollar the amount of money that you've saved up for a down payment up to 5% of the purchase price. So there's a few other eligibility criteria. Your income for everyone who's going to be registered on title needs to be $150,000 or less. The maximum purchase price of the home can be $750,000. You have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident for at least the last 5 years, and you must have been a BC resident for the last 12 months. But if you meet all those criteria, this is a program that can help to provide what will end up being second mortgage financing. So you'll get a high ratio insured mortgage as your first mortgage. And then this program can provide dollar for dollar matching on your down payment that will be registered as a second mortgage, with the real benefit being that then for the first 5 years, there's no interest and no payments on that mortgage.
Great. How many folks have taken advantage of the program over the past month and a half?
Yeah, so we advertised the program just before Christmas and started to accept applications in the middle of January. So up to last night, there's over 700 people that have applied for the program. I think about 600 have been approved so far, and that's for a total value of loans of about $6 million. The first loans that were paid out as purchases were being completed started on February 15th. So I think up to this point, we've got something like 125 that have actually funded and made it through that process.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Now I'll turn to Brad. Brad, when considering home ownership, can you provide some insight into the importance of home energy and the ongoing associated costs of that?
Thanks, Shane. Yes, as far as home ownership costs, your key considerations when looking to buy a home obviously should include your mortgage costs, your strata fees, or whatever other fees may be associated with it. But one of the key considerations people forget about is how much is it going to cost me to live there after I move in? One of the things that we focus on in Fortis is looking towards providing you the opportunity to save as much money as possible, and therefore we suggest you look to the energy options that are available within your home. Things like space and water heating contribute to 76% of your monthly utility costs. So that can be fairly substantial. Now, when you consider the fact that at the present rate structure, electricity is approximately 300% more expensive than natural gas, when you look at space and water heating that might be electric-based, that could be fairly significant monthly costs. And that could mean the difference between enjoying a real nice hot latte or taking a vacation or paying your monthly utility bills. So that piece of information is pretty important when you are looking at buying a new home.
Great, thanks. Maybe I'll just turn one question before we begin to turn it over to the audience, Robin, is what is mortgage loan insurance and how does it help in the home buying process?
Great. Thanks, Shane. Mortgage loan insurance is required by law for anybody who's buying a home with less than 20% down. So what this insurance does is it actually insures the bank in the case that there is a default on the mortgage. So in effect, mortgage loan insurance enables people to buy a home even if they don't have that 20% to put down.
Great. With that, we heard some initial comments from our speakers. Now I'd like to turn it over to the floor. We've got 2 roving mics, so just hold up your hand if you have a question, and folks will come to you. Yeah. right up front there.
Hi. Just ask about the government loan. Is it possible to use for pre-sale if you want to buy as a new construction? As a last deposit, because mostly 20% ask, and if somebody have a 15% and wants to use a 5% as a loan for the deposit for the pre-sale, is it possible or no?
Yeah, so the question is, can that BC Home Partnership loan be used for pre-sales? So absolutely, we encourage people to apply. This program, it's being delivered all online. Through BC Housing's website is how you apply. You can come on a computer or it works on a smartphone as well. But the program provides the loan at the completion date of the sale. So if you're going to buy a home through pre-sale, you can come to the website, you can apply to the program, find out that you're going to be approved and receive that approval. And the approval is going to be good for 6 months. So if your pre-sale is going to be a soon completion, that's fine. You know, it can all unfold and the loan will be there available on completion date. If the completion date is going to be further out than 6 months, then we just ask that you come back every 6 months and refresh that approval. And then eventually when you get to that point where you are purchasing the home and the completion date is happening, then the loan will be advanced at that point. So the only caution that I'd have is that it's a 3-year program, and the final advances on the program must happen before March 31st, 2020. So if, you know, probably today it's fine, your completion date on a pre-sale is not going to be further than 3 years out. But as the program goes along, you know, that's going to be a really important date for people to pay attention to. So,
As you know that most of developers ask 20% for deposit. So I know that if somebody wants to pay more than 20%, there is no eligible for 5% government loan. And that's government loans just pay in the completion, as you told, yeah. So, but the developer asks 5% or last deposit, maximum 1 year after pre-sale, and so it's time to the completion. So you have to pay 20% before the completion date to developers. So is it possible to use it?
Yeah, so I mean, you're pointing out that in order to purchase that pre-sale, the developer might be asking you to make deposits in advance of the completion of the home, and that can often total up to 20% of the purchase price. So can you still get the loan? So the answer is yes, but when you get to completion, you must be obtaining a high ratio insured mortgage. So, you know, that's a down payment of 20 or just under 20% or less. So, I mean, it would be possible for you to make those deposits on the purchase by borrowing the money in some way, however you're going to raise that. You might have saved it, you might have borrowed that on a line of credit or from family or whatever. But when you get to the actual completion date, you have to structure the purchase so that you are going to have a high ratio insured mortgage. You're going to have a down payment that's going to be matched dollar for dollar up to just 5% by this program. So, you know, conceivably, this program could provide 5% and you could provide 14.99% and get a high ratio mortgage, and that would work.
One thing that you might want to, again, it will be totally up to the discretion of the developer. However, if you actually already have the approval by BC Housing, what you could do is go to the lender and say, listen, I do have an approval for the rest of the amount. And then perhaps they would actually be with the letter of the approval. They might say, okay, you don't necessarily have to give the 20%. However, it will be totally up to the discretion of the developer, and they might not agree to it. Right? However, that's something that you could just check and see if that might be possible.
So my point is, actually I am realtor, so I have many clients that they can afford just 15% or 10% for deposit and for pre-sale. So, but they want to use, as a first home buyer, they want to use a 5% government loan. So, but when we go to the developers denied because they ask the money in the hand, not in the completion. And they need this maximum 1 year after contract. So this is a problem that we are facing now. So for me, I think that the government can help with giving this loan to the developer for each person that wants to buy as a new first home buyer. So it can help, more helpful. This is my idea. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions from the audience? We have one over here.
How do you define first-time home buyer? I have a client who sold their home 10 years ago. They are renting right now. So do they qualify as a first-time home buyer?
No, so a first-time home buyer would be someone who has never purchased a home anywhere ever before.
Oh, okay, thank you.
We have a question back there.
Is does that mean anywhere in the world?
Anywhere in the world.
Oh, okay. Another question. There's people that have come here before, and then the family rejoins them from outside of the country. The principal applicant will be eligible. However, the other family members will not be eligible because of the residency requirement, the permanent residency requirements. Now, will the principal applicant still qualify to apply for the BC home loan, but the rest of the people will have to, well, I'm from the lending company, so what we're proposing to structure it is it's only going to be the principal applicant who's going to apply for the loan, but we will have the other family member co-sign it. So will that be qualified under the BC home loan program?
Yes, and maybe.
Maybe.
So everyone who's going to be registered on title must meet all of the eligibility criteria. But certainly people can live in the home that aren't registered on title that don't meet the eligibility criteria. So the way you describe that, someone is a principal applicant. If they're the only one registered on title, no problem at all for other family to come later, as you described, and to live in the home. And then similarly, if the lender is going to require a co-signer or a guarantor on the mortgage, that's fine, as long as they either meet all the eligibility criteria and then they can be on title. But if they don't, it's fine for them to co-sign and guarantee the loan as long as everyone who ends up on title does meet the eligibility criteria. So if you think of the example, maybe a young couple needs to have a parent guarantee the loan. The young couple, they're both first-time home buyers, Canadian citizens, their income combined is below 150, that's fine. They're going to qualify for the program. And then as long as the parent that guarantors the loan is not registered on title, that's going to be fine under the program.
Mm-hmm. Another question, I'm just going to pose you a scenario, okay? So the principal applicant has applied for the home loan, okay? The other family members just co-signed, so they did not. Now, the other family members now qualifies. Can they apply for a second BC home loan?
So that's really like who's a first-time home buyer is what that question is asking. So when you have a registered interest in a home and you own that home, then you've become a home buyer. If somebody, I think you're describing someone else is living in the home, maybe it's a cousin or a nephew or someone is living in the home. So they weren't registered on title and they've never owned a home anywhere else in the world before. Well, in our view, they would still be a first-time home buyer. So yeah, they could go and purchase another home. They could apply to the program and qualify under the program to be able to buy a home somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Great. I'll turn to Vanessa. We have a question from a person watching online.
Hello, so they're asking about the BC Home program. Their question is, what programs could help me if I have only been a permanent resident for 1 year?
So, in that instance, you're not going to qualify for this program. So the eligibility criteria are that you do need to be a permanent resident for at least 5 years, a Canadian citizen for at least 5 years. So if you don't meet that criteria, you're not going to qualify for this particular program.
Okay, is there a different program that might help them?
So
Robin or Alyssa?
If they don't have enough money for the down payment, one thing could be that perhaps they might be able to get a gift from a family member, an immediate family member. So that would be pretty well a parent, a sibling, or a child, perhaps a grandma as well. Or the other option would be to actually start saving a little bit more money. Unfortunately, they need at least the 5% down. So if the BC Home Loan Program is not an option, a gift could be an option as well. But it has to be a gift. It cannot be repaid.
Any comments, Robin, on that one?
Yeah, just to reinforce that, yeah, if they can get together the 5%, then they are eligible for mortgage loan insurance, and they can pursue it that way.
I think there was a question back there.
What happens if you are a Canadian citizen and you moved back last year, but the exact date that you moved back is a little fuzzy because I worked remotely from Vancouver? Like, how do you define the date that you moved back, like the 12 months? Where do you start counting it from?
Oh, okay. So that's the 12 months residency requirement.
Yes.
So you're a Canadian citizen, but maybe haven't been in BC for 12 months. So we count 12 months back from the completion date of the purchase of the home. So we have had some examples, someone's applying to the program and they've been a resident for 10 months and they're wondering, can they apply? Well, yeah, they can go ahead and apply. And what we will be telling them as we give them their conditional approval is, you're going to be approved for the program. Just make sure when you go and buy that home and the completion date that it ends up 12 months from the date that you established your BC residency.
Okay, and established BC residency as in the day that you landed or the day that your MSP coverage started working, or how do you just?
Yeah, the day that you're physically resident in BC on a permanent basis. And, that's information that you're going to provide to us when you apply to the program. And then typically we're looking for some sort of documentary evidence around that. When you go to the online system and program, there is some help there. And, there's examples of the types of documents that we want to see to answer each of those criteria. So for example, Canadian citizenship, well, you can take a picture of your passport with your phone, and then the system lets you upload, a JPEG or a PDF document, that type of thing. For income, we're asking for a copy of the a CRA notice of assessment. We look at line 150 for those that care, and that confirms what your income is. But, I'd say go to the website and have a look there. There's some pretty good question and answers and information that, hopefully can take you through and answer all those things. And then if there's any questions that we didn't answer today, there is a call center that BC Housing has, a 1-800 number, and there's staff there. So you can call and, ask questions. If you're not sure on how that application process works or have a detailed question, just like the one that you've just had now, then, the staff at the call center should be able to answer that.
Thank you.
We'll go there and then online. Right there. Up this way.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Hi. So if I have a client, a couple, who make over $150,000 and they want to take advantage of this, as long as only one of them is on title and the other one co-signs, then they can take advantage of it?
Right. So the applicants to the program are the people who are going to end up registered on title. So, the way you described it, possibly that could work. But I'd also point out that the homeowner, the first-time homebuyer, does need to qualify for an insured high-ratio mortgage. So it's not just our criteria that are going to matter. So there's going to be a lender involved, obviously. And so the lender in underwriting that loan is going to be concerned about the debt service ratio, the credit score, and it's going to be looking at those things. And whether that's good with the lender or not is something that the homeowner is going to need to sort out, that someone is not going to be on title and is just going to be a co-signer. But, from the program's perspective, the BC Home Partnership Program, as long as someone has made it over those hurdles, qualified for that high ratio mortgage, and that's, actually in place when they complete, then we're only looking at the applicants who are registered on title to judge the eligibility criteria for the program. So, maybe just as an aside, one question we have had Canadian citizens that, are married to a spouse who is not a permanent resident for 5 years. And in those instances, we've said, if it works for you, and if you can have the one spouse who is a Canadian citizen on title, and the other one not an applicant to the program, not on title, that's absolutely fine under the program. So there's no test on household composition or total household income. We're just looking at applicants to the program that are registered on title.
Right, because theoretically, the marriage contract gives them 50% of the title anyways. That's not really a question, but, safeguard, I guess.
Can I mention something?
Yeah.
Sorry, we're talking here about co-signers and guarantors, and there's a very big difference. So co-signer, it means that person's still going to be on title. If you go with a guarantor, it means that person will not be on title. However, they will still be responsible for paying the mortgage, provided the person on title doesn't pay it. And if that guarantor decides to go and, say, pay for, buy another property or something else, they'll still have to account for that. So it's important to actually, so people know there is a difference between co-signer and guarantor. And some lenders, even though you're living in the property, they will want you as a co-signer. They might not want you as a guarantor.
So a co-signer is on title?
A co-signer is on title.
We'll go over to Vanessa, an online question.
So I have a question from Bailey. She's asking, if you pay less than the 20% down payment, how expensive is the mortgage insurance based on the percentage of the down payment you contributed?
Robin?
I would suggest that you go online and look at CMHC's website for that, because it does change with the different types of down payments and whether you've had help. So, for example, if you've borrowed some of the money, you'll be paying a higher premium than if you saved it all yourself. So there are a lot of different factors that set what the premium will be. So I would suggest that you take a look online, and that's probably your best way, and or to call CMHC if you'd like to speak with someone.
Yeah, I'd add to that too. So we really think that the typical person that we're going to serve under the program is someone who has a good income. You think of that example of, maybe a couple, they've both got good incomes, but they might have student loans, might have a car loan, might be starting their family. So, they haven't saved all the down payment that they need. The minimum down payment is going to be 5% to purchase a home with CMHC insurance or insurance from one of the other two. So in that case, they're going to put up 2.5%, and the BC Home Partnership Program could match that with 2.5%. In that circumstance, the mortgage insurers view the money coming from the BC Home Program as a non-traditional source down payment, and that means that the insurance fee is going to be at the highest rate. So I think today it's 3.85%, and there's been an announcement about a new fee schedule that kicks in. I forget exactly what the date is. March 17th, the higher fee schedule kicks in, and so then I think the fee goes up to 4.5. Someone in the audience just 4.25. So, Robin gave good advice. I think you can go to the CMHC website. It has the fee schedule there. And then I think as you're working with your lender, that's the type of thing that the lender is able to give you advice on. But, from the perspective of the BC Home Partnership Program, this is really a program that's there to help people that can't afford a mortgage. They haven't saved all the down payment that they need. By getting this matching assistance, they can get into the market quicker, they can purchase that home, and then the benefit that they're going to get is no interest and no payment for 5 years on this mortgage, the second mortgage loan. But there are costs associated with that. You do need to get a second mortgage registered, and you have to pay the legal fees for that, so that's $560. And then you're going to pay a higher insurance premium, potentially, than you might have if you'd been able to save 5% all yourself. So, the advice we're giving to people is the very first step in the process should be for you to go in and talk to your financial professional. So, talk to your lender, talk to your mortgage broker, and I think depending on individual circumstances, the program might be helpful and might make sense. And for some other people that might have other sources to get that down payment together, this might not be the best way to go. But I think you're going to get that advice if you sit down with your financial advisor and do the math.
Great. We have time for one or two more questions. You have one over there?
I just wanted to ask about the fixed versus variable mortgage. I know mortgages were like really riding really low for a while, and they've started to go up a bit. What advice would you have for first-time home buyer who's looking at mortgages and was debating what's the best way to go, fixed versus variable?
That's actually now with the new mortgage rules, the reality is whether you're qualifying for a fixed or a variable rate, you qualify at the same qualifying rate, which right now is at 4.64. So if you're deciding whether to go with fixed or variable, the reality is a personal preference. Usually what I advise my clients is what you're actually comfortably. If you want to know that for the next 5 years, these are going to be your payments, then go with fixed. If you actually are okay, if it actually your payments do go up through the term, then go with a variable. So again, it's what the home each person is comfortable with. That's the biggest thing. Again, it's also the strategy of what you're going to be doing with the home, because the penalties can be quite different as well. So it's not just go variable or fixed. It's really figuring out a right strategy based on what your needs are going to be 3 or 5 years down the road. And then from there is like, let's figure out what is the best option for you. Does that help?
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I'm curious about like what the forecast is for the interest rates, in your opinion.
Okay, in my opinion, so, well, interest rates, even though they have moved up a little bit, they're still relatively low. The fixed rates are actually dependent on the bond market. The variable rates are actually dependent on Bank of Canada. So Bank of Canada right now, and they just released it Wednesday, so yesterday, they're maintaining the prime rate the same. So there's no changes. So what might happen with the lender is the discount that they offer you off posted rate might be higher. So then that means your rate is going to be a little bit lower, right? So again, it depends on what it is. I mean, if the bond market goes up, interest rates go up. If the bond market goes down, fixed rates go down. So again, a lot of it, again, it depends of what's a personal preference. A lot of clients say, you know what, yeah, it's totally fine. I'm okay because right now, as a variable rate, I know I actually going to be putting a lot more money towards my mortgage. So it might be a best option. But there's people that when they're making that transition from renters to home buyers, they're like, no, I just want to know exactly how much my my mortgage is going to be for the next year. I know how much my strata fees are going to be, what my property taxes are, because obviously those will fluctuate, as well as heating, because that is part of what is the calculations are used. So again, it's always a personal preference, and it's sitting down with your broker or your bank and figuring what are my best options, because everybody's different.
Maybe I'll just turn it to Brad, because Alyssa was talking about, looking ahead, and energy and other costs are something that folks should consider as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As it stands right now, natural gas has been relatively stable as far as pricing is concerned, which is more than what we can say for our electrical prices. They've jumped fairly considerably over the last year, and based on some announcements that were a couple of years ago, the initial plan for electrical rates, they do plan to increase year over year for the next 3 to 5 years. So, when you are looking at purchasing a home, take a look at the major consumers of energy within that house, whether it be your space heating, your water heating, your cooking, your clothes drying. Take a look at all of those appliances that are major consumers of energy, and do your homework. We have an online energy calculator on the Fortis BC website that gives you the opportunity to take a look at exactly how much it's going to cost you based on a per square foot basis. There's several inputs that you make on a web page, and it will leave you a number after all the calculations are done, and it'll tell you exactly what it's going to cost you to, well, I shouldn't say exactly, I mean, it'll depend on your lifestyle, but it'll give you a pretty good idea as to what it's going to cost you to live there on a monthly basis.
Great, thanks, Brad. We'll now move into the wrap-up. We've covered a lot of important information. I'd like to give the panelists what is one nugget you would leave a home buyer tonight? Why don't we start with Robin?
This is, of course, one of the. I applaud you first of all for coming out and starting your research and getting information. This is a huge decision, of course. So I would, first of all, encourage you to go and check out CMHC's Home Buying Step-by-Step Guide. This will take you through the whole process, right from deciding whether home ownership is right for you or not. And gives you a lot of tools to use to be able to do some of those financial calculations, look at what your budget is going to be like, all of these kinds of things. And then, so if you do decide to buy a home, then you can follow along with the rest of the steps, and it'll take you right through to the very end of, you know, making sure that the contracts are correct and that, you know, everything is done correctly. And just gives you a lot of ways to make a more informed decision. And that's right through all of the steps. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, is that it's personal for you and your circumstances, so you need to take an active role in deciding whether it's right for you and what process is right for you if you do decide to buy.
Dan, one nugget?
Well, for everyone in the room, BC Housing has a booth that's out in the hallway, and there's some information there on the BC Home program. And for everyone that's online, I'd say go to bchousing.org and take a look at the BC Home Partnership program. All of the information on eligibility for the program is there. There's an online calculator that lets you plug in your information and tell you how much of a loan you could potentially qualify for. And the most important thing that we're telling people before they come to apply for the program, they should sit down with their financial professional, with their lender, with their mortgage broker, and have that realistic discussion with your income, with the debts that you've got. What is the amount of an insured mortgage that you're going to be able to qualify for? What's the realistic home price that you can afford? And with that in hand, you're able to apply to the program.
Great, thanks, Dan. Brad, one nugget?
Do your homework. It's real key. I mean, when you're looking at purchasing a house, you've obviously got all the different financing options that we've talked about here, and you know exactly what it's going to cost you going into the house. You have no idea what it's going to cost you until your lifestyle has been part of living in that home. Just ensure that you have the ability to really look at what it's going to cost you to live there. That's my only nugget. I've seen employees within even our own company where they have moved into townhouse projects and were very shocked at how much it was going to cost them for their electric bill. And when they had the opportunity to buy something that included natural gas, might have been for a few $1,000s more to buy a natural gas equipped home, but they ended up choosing one that was a little less expensive, and it cost them far more in energy costs. So it pretty much worked out equal. And unfortunately, people are making the wrong mistakes.
And Alyssa.
Do your homework. I actually have it in your package. There is some tidbits of some things to consider when you're actually looking for a mortgage. It's in your bags. We talked about interest rates, so please don't only focus on interest rates, really look at the overall mortgage. And the biggest tip I would, well, they're all tips, but one of the things that is like, don't only buy something, what is the maximum amount you qualify for, and go and buy a home of that price. Actually buy something where you're comfortably paying on a monthly basis. Because as a renter, you're just paying rent. When you get to become a homeowner, you're paying mortgage, you're paying property taxes. If it's a strata, you're paying strata fees and heating as well. So make sure you don't want to stretch yourself so much that it actually starts compromising your lifestyle and you have a beautiful home, but you have no life. So that would be probably one of the biggest tips I would give you as well.
Great. So thanks to Brad, Alyssa, Robin, and Dan for an engaging discussion. For those of you who are with us online, thank you for joining us, and be sure to stay with us for the next panel, Looking for Market Intelligence. That begins at 6 p.m. For those of you in the audience, We're going to take a 10-minute break and we'll allow you to go out into the marketplace. Tonight's speakers and their associates will be there if you have any additional questions. Be sure to get your condo card. I have a sample of that. It is in your is in the kit that you got tonight. Be sure to get it stamped because then it will enter you into a draw for some fabulous door prizes. There is a survey as well, and that's been given in your consumer kit. The survey is always a great opportunity for feedback to the Greater Vancouver home builders so that they can design better and more informative sessions in the future. The reward for that, if you're lucky enough, is a $300 Home Depot gift card, compliments of RBC. Lastly, just a brief shout out to our sponsors, speaker sponsors, Canada Mortgage and Housing, the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, Condominium Homeowners Association, and Fortis BC. Our media sponsors, the Vancouver Sun and Province, rew.ca, Black Press, Glacier Media, YP Next Home, New Home and Condo Guide, and Shaw. Thank you. Please take the time to visit the marketplace, and we'll see you for the next session at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
So no
More than an address or a structure, a home is the building block of family and society that gathers us and holds us together, no matter where we're from. We open the door and feel secure in our place in the community, in our country. Your own apartment, your own home, your own place to make memories, take comfort, and build a better future. It is a powerful ideal that is linked by the strongest of bonds to our identity as a nation. That's why for more than 70 years, no single organization has been more fundamental to building an inclusive housing system than Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. From the biggest cities to the smallest towns of this vast country, housing matters to all Canadians. Helping Canadians meet their housing needs is what we do. Our nationally available mortgage loan insurance facilitates access to rental housing and allows qualified Canadians to become homeowners. Just as important is ensuring our lenders have reliable access to funds, providing more choices for Canadians to find a mortgage, no matter where they live. That's good for the homebuyer, for our housing system, and for the financial stability of our country. When it comes to opening doors for Canadians, our people are at the forefront, offering support, guidance, and expertise in the field, and creating comprehensive tools and resources for housing sector professionals. The research we do and the data we collect and analyze allows us to provide unrivaled insight to an evolving marketplace. It helps mortgage professionals become more informed about what their clients want and expect. It allows developers to supply properties that meet those demands, and it informs decisions by all levels of government on policy and investment in Canada's housing market. We know adequate housing creates the conditions for success. Working with our partners, we help support affordable housing for all Canadians, including seniors, Indigenous, low-income households, and other vulnerable people in Canada. Our quality of life is considered one of the best in the world. It's no accident that Canada's housing system is held up as an example of what we can all accomplish when we use innovation and passion to keep moving forward. Home is at the heart of our country. For many Canadians, it starts with us.
Maintaining your home takes a little more effort than a coat of paint or a weekly lawn mow in the summer. It costs money to maintain it. It takes energy to run it. Think of all the different places that energy goes, like running your fridge or heating your water. How do you maximize efficiency and get the best value? It starts by choosing the right energy for the right use. And using electricity and natural gas in the right places provides an equal combination of that comfort, convenience, and efficiency. Burgers on the grill? With natural gas, you'll never have to lift a heavy propane tank again or worry about running out of fuel. With natural gas, you have so many choices. It starts when you choose to include it as part of a balanced energy mix.
Nearly every day we access global information. We also want to communicate, connect, and be entertained. Speed makes a world of difference. The revolutionary TELUS Pure Fiber network delivers the lightning-fast access you crave. Fiberglass strands transport information close to the speed of light, and with more than enough bandwidth for you and your neighbors, you'll have reliable, instant access anytime you want.
TELUS Pure Fiber allows me to upload just as fast as I can download. It allows me to keep in touch with my very international family. It allows me to work from home and video conference with colleagues and clients from all over the world.
Being on the Strata, my thing from the building perspective is that we're set up for the future. So no matter where technology goes, whether we're going to be streaming a lot and using a lot more data, we have the infrastructure in place for years and years to come. We won't have to change anything for decades.
I'd recommend TELUS. It's all just been pick up the phone, call your rep, they deal with it. The technical side gets dealt with, and then the construction side gets dealt with.
Future-proof technologies within our buildings will allow all our users to access all the applications and all the new technologies that are coming forward in various ways and in ways that we haven't even thought of yet.
Unleash the value of fiber to the home with the TELUS Pure Fiber network. Get connected today.
Most of you have been with us earlier, so I won't go through our whole preamble. I would like to take this moment, though, to thank our presenting sponsor again, BC Housing, and our speaker sponsors, Fortis BC, Canada Mortgage and Housing, Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, and the Condominium Homeowners Association. And our media sponsors, the Vancouver Sun Province, the Glacier Media Group, REW.ca, Black Press, and YP Next Home, New Home and Condo Guide. It would be very much appreciated tonight if you would take the time to fill out the survey. We are very interested in hearing back from you on what you're interested in and how you heard about us and how you heard about this forum. Shane Ramsey, the CEO, to kick off the second session.
Thank you, Don, and welcome to our second session, Looking for Market Intelligence. We have a great set of panelists who are willing to share their knowledge of the home buying and now home living. Consistent with the first session, each panelist will be introduced. I'll ask them a few questions and we'll open it up to you. And for those online, again, there is a chat room on the online application. Just put your question in there, click send, and Vanessa will identify when we have some questions from our online guests. We have a really interesting panel for our second session. We have Adrian Crook. Adrian is a dad living in a condo with 5 kids. Condo is 1,000 square feet and he lives on the 29th floor. Adrian blogs at 5kids1condo.com, where he discusses the advantages of living in a dense, urban, car-free family life. I live in a 1,300 square foot condo with just one other person, and sometimes that feels too close. And really pleased to have Tony Giaventu. Tony is the Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association. Tony is right here. CHOA is a consumer association in British Columbia representing over 200,000 members comprising strata corporations. Tony is one of those go-to experts. He writes in the media all the time, and he's one of our folks that we regularly discuss condominium issues with, as does government. They're always seeking out Tony's advice and that advice of CHOA. And finally, Dan Morrison. Dan is in our middle. Dan is the president of the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver and a 25-year realtor in North Vancouver. It is the professional organization representing over 13,000 realtors across Metro. RBC has pads, so if you have any questions, please write them down. And now we'll begin, just a few questions for our panel. What's it like living in a 1,000 square foot condo on the 29th floor with you and your children?
What's it like? I mean, certainly what you said about sometimes it's hard to, be that close to your fellow humans. It certainly applies. And I think that applies in any house size. But the advantages that come from living in such a small space and living in a centrally located space are precisely why I do it. It's cheaper. It's healthier. I'm more connected with my kids, and we get to live in a place that's culturally rich and has all sorts of amenities for my children.
Are there any conflicts that happen, Adrian, that you can talk about? Both, maybe within the house, and where I want to go with this one is, just with your neighbors and stuff, and then we'll maybe go to Tony around some of those issues and how they get resolved in condominium living.
Yeah, and this is a concrete construction building built in 1994, so it's relatively sound resistant. I'm not going to say proof. But, at times there are sound issues. Obviously 5 kids running around. I've had the odd complaint from the neighbor down below that we know really well, and he can text me and say, can your kids stop jumping from the 3rd bunk or something. So that does happen, but it's actually pretty good. I think in a wood frame building it might be worse.
Great. Maybe I'll turn to you now, Tony, and maybe you could just comment about. Microphone. Maybe you could just comment about some of the considerations around condo living. Obviously, in places in the urban areas in the Lower Mainland, condominium living has become almost a prevalent form of housing options for folks.
Yes, definitely. And what we've seen now is that there is a trend to families as well as every other type of lifestyle who find that condominium living is the ideal option because it saves time, it's economic for people, their ability to live in proximity to their workplace is better enhanced, and the cost per square foot compared to having single family residence is just much more accessible. But it comes with conflicts, which we certainly see plenty of. And I'd say that the lion's share of most of the conflicts deal with nuisance complaints. And so there are things like noise, there are issues like smoking in strata lots, activities that occur and cause disruption to other units. But when you look at the number of complaints that are really, realistically, that go into the courts and comparatively go into the tribunal system, consider that we have close to 1 million condo units and we average a couple hundred complaints a month. It's really an indication that condo living is working well, and that there are actually very few complaints that get to the point of some sort of conflict resolution. I think the other side of it that's changed dynamically now within the last year for condo owners is that so many of the small complaints that seem to be real irritants to people who live in buildings that were costly to deal with, things that councils had to deal with that were burdensome and costly, have changed dramatically because we now have the Civil Resolution Tribunal. And the tribunal now gives people a really great outlet. It's an online service. You get an enforceable order. It's mandatory for owners, tenants, occupants, strata councils, and strata corporations. And it's a great way to resolve complaints quickly, get consensual solutions, and help communities live in a really stable harmony. And I think we're really starting to see the implication of that in a very positive way.
Is the tribunal up and running now, and is it beginning to hear cases?
The tribunal has been up and running since August 2016. The cases, it has 3 parts to it. The first part is called a Solution Explorer, which is a kind of a self-help, self-diagnostic process where you can go into the system. It's a question-answer guided pathway process that helps you to structure through the problem that you're having, gives you some tools and some indications of how to deal with things. If you can't solve those, you can file and start a complaint with the tribunal. You end up then getting a case manager, and that person helps the parties see if they can find a consensual solution. And if you can't find a consensual solution, it goes to adjudication. So it's up, it's running, case managers are appointed, decisions are already being issued, and they're posted on the Civil Resolution Tribunal website as well.
Great, thanks. Maybe I'll turn to you now, Dan. And maybe we'll start at the very beginning. How does a buyer without industry contacts find a realtor who is the right fit for them?
Well, I think the most important question there is, I would like to reframe it a little bit and say, make sure you make the attempt to find your own realtor. And I think it breaks my heart when I see, especially young first-time buyers that have never done this before, and they wander into, and I know this is home builders here, and I know you have great people in your sales offices, but you know, what the buyer needs to remember is whether it's a resale residential listing or a new condo, that the person there is representing the seller and not you as the buyer. And so you really need to work hard at finding somebody that you trust and that can show you those homes and give you advice properly that's interested in your best interest and not in the seller's best interest. So first of all, make the decision to find your own realtor and don't just wander around from open house to open house or developer's office or showroom and just pick who's ever going to show up that day. I think most of us will look online. We will talk to friends and family, and they can often be a great source of who they trust and who's worked well for them. So that's a great source, and rely on those referrals. And then and make sure you interview them. Spend some time with them. Ask them to do a buyer's presentation. We all hear about a listing presentation for sellers, but as a buyer, you should be able to sit down and interview your realtor. Ask them how they operate, how they help you. Are they available when you need them to be available? Will they take you to all the listings? Will they help you find listings? Will they give you advice? Do they understand contracts? Can they help you negotiate? All those things are really, really important, and you need to understand what role that they are willing to play and make sure they're committed to working for you.
Maybe I'll stay with you, Dan. What neighborhoods or areas within neighborhoods are you seeing as better opportunities for entry-level pricing for first-time buyers?
Well, it's no secret that the further you get away from the downtown core, the prices are better. And certainly as prices have escalated in Vancouver over the years, we've seen, especially the first-time buyers are being forced to either downsize their expectations of what they want in the city or else to move further out of the city. So there's no question that the best prices in Metro Vancouver are going to be in, out in Port Coquitlam or Maple Ridge or, New Westminster. You start to see the prices drop drastically when you get kind of outside that kind of 20-minute commute to downtown Vancouver.
Are you seeing a lot of your buyers looking at condominium options?
It's interesting, I think, and this is a shout out to all the developers, that the biggest frustration my clients are having that would love, I mean, people my age that they're in these 3,000 square foot homes and all the kids have moved out, and I say to them, is it time to downsize? And they say, well, where would we go? And their frustration is that a lot of the condominium product being built is too small. Either the rooms are too small, and they don't want to have to go out and buy all new furniture, or they want 2 bedrooms and a den, and those there's just not, or 3 bedrooms, and there's just not enough that kind of product that they're willing to downsize to. And the product that is out there, they're not actually putting enough money in the bank to justify it. So here we are screaming that we need more single-family home inventory in Vancouver, yet we've got all these people my age that are sitting in houses that are way too big for them, that would be great for a family, especially somebody with 5 kids, to move into. So we have a guy with 5 kids living in a condo, and the people that, that have room for 5 kids is just the 2 of them.
Maybe I'll go back to you, Adrian. What do you see as some of the benefits of living in an urban environment, and what are some of the impacts on your kids, and how do you see that condo living helping to shape them?
Yeah, before I get onto that, I wanted to address what Dan was saying about the concept of driving to afford, like you sort of go 20 minutes out or whatever. I grew up in Port Moody, so I know that bedroom community kind of very well. But like consistently, I guess backing this up, every housing choice is also a transportation choice. And the most expensive places to live are the suburbs when you factor in housing and transportation, because you're going to need a car or two. So I think, that's a really important thing to look at. The sticker price of a downtown condo may be higher than a condo, let's say, or a detached house in the suburbs. But when you load up the 1 or 2 cars you're going to need and the time you're going to give up commuting, potentially, if you're working downtown, that really is a losing equation, and that's I think that's the bit of math that a lot of people don't jump to. They just sort of drive till they can afford, and they have that high-paying job downtown, and the two don't really add up all the time. But as far as the benefits to my kids of living downtown, we don't have to own a car. I work from home. They see me far more than I ever saw my dad or parents growing up, because I'm around all the time. I can be really involved in their lives. They get a much more sort of progressive view of the world than what I find in the suburbs is a really, I grew up in Port Moody, I've lived in North Van. You get a lot of, there are no poor people, there's no downtown east side in the suburbs, which some people think is a good thing. But on the other hand, I like to show my kids more of a diverse world and something representative of the world we live in. And all the culture downtown and the things we can walk to. And the fact that, my 4 or 5-year-old, 5 now as of a couple weeks ago, he's been walking 10K a day at times with us as a family for a couple of years now. So that kind of ambient exercise that we get just, not having a car and living downtown is stuff that, in the suburbs you just don't get. So that urban car-free living is, I think, a lot of the benefits are often overlooked.
Maybe one last question for Tony before we go out to the audience. Tony, what are some of the things that you would look for when you're making maybe a choice of a condominium? What are some of the positives and negatives that you would review before you choose a certain building?
Well, I think that lifestyle is probably the first thing that you should look at closely. Pet-friendly buildings, if you want to have cats and dogs, be perfectly clear on whether they're permitted, what the bylaws impose within that community, how much flexibility there's going to be around your pets. Look at things like parking. If you need a car, what do you have available for facilities for parking? Take a look at the age of your buildings also. If you're looking at older buildings that are 15 years plus, start looking closely at how much money these communities have in their reserves. Are they going to be able to pay for the new roof? Are they going to be able to pay for the new elevator? Are you going to be looking at special levies? Start doing the math around what some of those implications are. But just going back to one of the comments made earlier about looking for larger homes because there aren't homes to make up for the 2,000-3,000 square foot home, we're actually starting to see a trend now, which our legislation makes a provision for people people to consolidate multiple strata lots. And so in mid-rise, high-rise buildings, buyers are buying 2 or 3 units next to each other that may be smaller units and consolidating them into one strata lot to make a much larger living space. And that's totally permitted under the framework of our legislation, and it's quite easily done for people. So it's another innovative way of looking at existing space and transforming it into larger living accommodations.
When you're looking at purchasing a condo, what are some of the Strata Corporation documents that you should ask for?
Everything. I don't think you could just narrow it down to one document. You certainly want an information certificate, which is going to provide you with the basic financial information of the strata. It's going to tell you things like whether an owner-developer rental exemption existed and whether you'll be exempt from rental bylaws and how that would apply, what your parking spaces and storage lockers are going to be, and most important, whether the strata has a depreciation report and what that depreciation report is at. The strata has an obligation to provide that to you, and it basically provides you with a roadmap of the next 30 years of the strata, how old things are, when they need to be replaced, how much it's going to cost. And as a buyer, I think it's probably the most essential tool that you need to look at. It's important to remember that when you buy in a condo, your home is not your castle. It is a collective entity of everyone. You all jointly are liable for everything that happens in that property. So being as well informed as possible. I think the other piece of advice I always give every buyer, don't believe anything somebody tells you. Get it confirmed in writing. It's amazing how much the number of misunderstandings, misinterpretation, misinformation that is conveyed to people about things like rental bylaws, age bylaws, pet bylaws. Just because you see pets in a building doesn't mean pets are permitted in a building. There are exemptions for all types of animals under the Guide Dog Service Animal Act, but you may have a bylaw that prohibits pets. So you need to exercise as much patience as you can. Don't get just lured by that suddenly we've got a great view here. You fall in love with the place. Take the extra day or two, read through the documents, look at the minutes of meetings, see what's going on with the property, look at the depreciation report, get as much disclosure as you can regardless of the age of the building. Even some of the newest buildings out there have had some pretty steep conflicts that have been pretty costly.
Maybe one final question. What about inspections in a condominium building, Tony? Do pre-inspections make sense?
Well, depreciation reports have essentially replaced inspections for stratas that are generally 10 units or more. And the reason for that is that the inspector doesn't inspect the entire building. What they are going to inspect is your strata lot that you're purchasing, but they don't inspect the infrastructure of the building, the condition of the elevators, the roof on the high-rise, the mechanical, electrical systems. That's really what the role of the depreciation report is to give you a condition analysis of, the estimate of what's the current condition of these components and how long are they going to basically survive before we have to pay for renewals. Inspections can be helpful with respect to smaller stratas, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, where the inspector has access to the entire building and can inspect everything. They don't necessarily have the same access, though, in a high-rise building or a larger complex.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Maybe now we'll turn it over to the audience. I know the panel is anxious to respond to any comments or questions that you have. If you just put up your hand, then one of the mics will be brought to you.
Someone mentioned that Port Coquitlam, New West, and Maple Ridge would have the best prices right now. What about Surrey?
Unfortunately, Surrey isn't covered by our real estate board. It's the Fraser Valley board. But it's the same thing applies. The other thing to look for is when you see a lot of density, when there's a lot of projects around there, especially if they're all for sale at the same time, you'll tend to see better value there because all those developers are competing to sell their product at the same time. Now, when there's such a shortage of inventory right now, that's why we're seeing prices go up. But if you watch, and there's a lot of projects that are coming on stream at the same time. And for example, areas like Brentwood or maybe even Metrotown in the coming years, when you see lots of projects coming on, those developers will be competing for your for your business, and so the prices may be a little more attractive than they are when there's a very low, a shortage of inventory.
Dan is asking, how important is it to get a home inspection done on a new build?
A new build it's a tougher one, and it's because you are covered by the warranty. You have the owner developer has some responsibilities to make sure that if there's any deficiencies that they have to fix those. So it's less likely that you're going to get an inspection on a new build. It really depends on the comfort level and the risk level that the buyer is willing to take. But even on as Tony was talking about inspections, even on older buildings, there are becoming less and less. Partly it's because of the competition that's going on right now with multiple offers, so we're seeing less and less inspections. But what I've done, and that's worked really well for my clients, is that I will often bring in an inspector to interpret the depreciation report for my clients, and so they would walk through the building and walk around the common areas and say, well, the depreciation report says this, but I think it's actually worse than that, or it's better than that. So they have an experienced person actually giving them an opinion, that for them on what the depreciation report actually says.
You mentioned that, when you look at the condo condominium, look at the reserve, for example. One of our questions is how much it's considered to be healthy, considering it's an old building, for example, especially when also talking about the depreciation report, there's a lot of things that looking at, the age of the rooms, different infrastructure. So if it is with certain age, how much should compared to what the reserve for your condominium, can you give us an example about the amounts?
Well, I think I can safely say there's never enough. And I think everyone who's ever owned a condo would agree that there's never enough money in the reserve funds. But I think that the legislation requires that the report look at the next 30 years. And it's always the next 30 years from when you have the report done. And that helps to look at the long-term effect. Most people can't understand what 30 years means. But look at the big things that are coming up in the report in the next 5 to 10 years. And then total those up and compare those to how much money's in the reserve fund and how much the Strata is putting in each year to figure out if the Strata doesn't fund all of these, then it's pretty obvious we're going to have to be paying some special levies. Another word for special levies, deferred strata fees, right? That's the phrase for special levies, because that's really what they are. If you funded enough money to meet those things, you would never have any special levies. But emergencies happen, unusual things happen. The most amount of money that you can comfortably put in that's still affordable for your owners is what you should try to achieve. We did a number of surveys across the province. Back in 2005, the average strata from the building surveys from 1,000 buildings, the average strata was contributing about $11 a unit per month into their contingency funds. Since depreciation reports have come in, going back to the same surveys, we've seen that increase to between $40 and $50 a month. For contingency, which is getting closer to what is realistically needed just for the long-term repairs. I think that the biggest problem with special levies is when they usually come up, they're almost always defeated on the first go, right? And the problem with that is we end up deferring maintenance and repairs to buildings that causes more damage to our buildings that eventually just costs everybody more money. So if you save the money in small increments over a long period of time, you fix things as they need to be repaired, and it's much more economic for the strata. Strata councils are volunteers, but oftentimes they're running a strata that may be $50 or $100 million asset. So you need some help with doing business plans. And if you're an investor and a buyer, get involved in your strata and get on your strata council. Be a decision maker that takes a role in what the future of your strata looks like.
Dan? Just to add that point about depreciation reports, I think a lot of stratas defer them because they're scared of what's out there. And if I'm a potential buyer, I want to know what they're hiding. So I'm going to almost demand that, or I'm going to walk to another building. But also they're saving it because they don't want to spend the money to do the depreciation report. Well, they are actually costing their owners, because I know my buyers will walk away from a building if they haven't done a depreciation report. So they're actually costing the owners money by not doing that depreciation report, because they're not going to get the value. If my client has a choice between two buildings that look exactly the same, one has a depreciation report and one doesn't, they're going with the one where they actually have somebody telling them what's going to happen in the future, and there's no concern about that they're hiding something.
Maybe Adrian, a comment on how well do you think your strata is run, and have you been involved in any of the issues that have come up?
No, because I rent. In the past, I've owned houses and I've owned condominiums, and I've never been involved with the stratas, but I've had, you have your issues with them. But no, I don't really have a position on how well stratas are run.
Right, but your building, well maintained, and
Yeah.
any issues?
No, not really. I mean, it's got a pool, which will produce more issues and higher strata fees overall. And it's got an elevator, 2 elevators that go out of service more than you'd like, and will probably need some kind of major overhaul at some point. I imagine that'd be a large capital expense. So there are always issues like that, and older plumbing that they've talked about an entire plumbing retrofit, which would be a giant special levy, I'm sure. So there are issues like that where if you talk to the building manager, they'll say, I wouldn't buy in here, if you really get the inside skinny. But yeah.
You had a question back there?
Yeah, can you hear me? This is a question for Tony. We have a depreciation report. It's about 90 pages long. I didn't really get a chance to study it really carefully before we bought, but is there a quick takeaway you can take, like a summary or something that you can get the major points from a depreciation report? There's a lot of things to look at when you're buying a unit.
It really depends on who the writer of the depreciation report is. Some of the writers will actually provide a single spreadsheet that shows the next 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, and shows when the major costs are coming and what they're going to be. Other writers will leave it buried within the report. So it's kind of a difficult thing to always be able to get a summary. But when you're looking at a depreciation report, look for a summary sheet. The summary sheet should be able to give you a pretty quick picture about what major items are coming up, how soon, and they're going to be the typical things we're all used to. They're roofing, decks and balconies, they're going to be elevators, plumbing and electrical mechanical systems. Look for the target items that are the big expense items. Another thing that's coming up if you're looking to purchase older buildings that are going to be 15, 20, 25, 30 years old, when you start looking at those that have large landscaping over top of parking garages, those are major expenses that are going to be coming up because the membranes need to be replaced, which means all the landscaping has to be removed for the membranes to be done. And so on some older projects, there's some pretty big expenses. And this is just part of the normal cycle of the life and the design of the buildings. It's nothing that was unusual or exceptional, but there are some big expenses coming up for older buildings. And there are many stratas who have actually been planning for these. We have a number of great examples of stratas that are 500 or 600 units in the Lower Mainland who are doing major upgrades over the next 5 years, and they've been funding for the last 10 years, and they have no special levies. So, every strata is different on how they approach long-term planning and money and expectation. So you want to look closely at what those implications are going to be.
Great. So we have 2 questions on this side. We'll go to you, and then Mark right there. Yeah.
Hi, yes, so my question is for Adrian. I was just taking a quick look at your website, and I'm really interested in your strategy of kid densification. I think that, for a lot of people in this city, the lack of multiple bedroom units has kind of created this de facto one-child policy where people feel like, 1 kid per bedroom, and I actually can't have a bigger family because there's nowhere to put them. And we've gone to view some condos and properties where families were moving out because they felt that their 2 kids were getting too big to share the 1 room in the 2-bedroom house. So I guess my question is, you're doing it now, but are you worried about the teenage years, and what's your strategy to cope with that, and how do you feel about this de facto kind of one-child policy that Vancouver's got going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I get that comment about like, just wait until they're teenagers, like all the time on the blog. I think people are rooting for me to fail. But I think in a house, the goal seems to be like a single family house. The goal seems to be that each room has a single purpose. It's very odd. Like you'll have a formal dining room, and then this is your office, and then, Tony talked about combining strata lots to create a bigger unit. But a more economical way to create more space is to maximize like what we call sort of square feet hours within your house. So, that bedroom that may only be used for sleeping, can you turn that into an office by day, or can you turn it into a kid's playroom by day? In my space, we have my girls' room. Basically, one of the bottom bunks converts to a table with a couple benches. My bedroom has a Murphy bed that goes up so the kids can have a play area there, and then I have a TV on a cart that can wheel between rooms, so I can change, the sort of magnetic attraction for where the kids, where I want them to be. So I have a couple friends who also have 5 kids, and they live in 900 square feet in Yaletown, and I'll have them over with their 5 kids, and there'll be 10 kids in 3 bedrooms playing, during the night, doing various things from gymnastics to video games. And the 3 adults, my couple friends and I will have a very quiet wine and cheese night in the living room, because we've made the maximal use of those rooms, that, both from a day and night perspective. And I think, I think that's what you have to be more intelligent about how you're using your space, and you can do that more economically than buying a larger house or buying, combining strata units. No offense, but so I don't really get. I also don't get the idea that kids can't share bedrooms. I mean, how many of us grew up sharing a bedroom with a sibling? Like this, all of a sudden, is this reprehensible thing you don't want to put your kids through, sharing a bedroom. I'm never going to have a 6-bedroom house or condo, so they're always going to share bedrooms, so I don't see any logic to moving into a new place. And maybe it'll mean that my kids don't live with me into their 30s, and I'm probably okay with that.
Yeah. Great, we have a question up front here.
Tony, I'd be interested to know, Tony, what percentage of stratas do you believe in BC do now have mandatory depreciation reports done on the books? And what advice would you give to buyers who, seeing it as an amber flag if there is no report available, how do you advise them to get around that concern?
Well, think of buying a used car for a minute. You go to a car lot, you know nothing about the vehicle, you have no information about it, and it's something that you start by tire kicking and you look at the appeal of it, but then you start getting closer into it. Wouldn't you like to know who owned it? Wouldn't you like to know, has it ever been in a flood? Has it ever been submerged? Look at all of the scams that happen when there are cars that are flooded out in zones around the world that end up in our front door that people buy. All those types of issues that occur. Compare that to a condo that you're buying into that has no disclosure about the history of what happened. Has there ever been a major flood in the building? Has this unit been flooded out? When was the last time the roof was upgraded? What is the condition of the elevator? Do we have electrical system issues? What are our plans to upgrade the parking podiums? Those types of issues. If you don't know any of that information, how do you know what your future liabilities are going to be? And that's, I think, really the perspective that buyers have to put that into. With respects to the percentage of stratas, when we do sample testing across the province, it's actually quite surprising, but less than 7% of the stratas that we sample test of 10 units or more have exempted from depreciation reports. Most of them are actually having depreciation reports done, the vast majority. The vast majority are having depreciation reports done. And even in places where you would think there would be less reason to do it or less dedication, we see even higher numbers for depreciation reports. And everyone's seen the value of them. It isn't about disclosing to buyers what the future looks like. It's about enabling property owners to effectively manage their property. And stratas, the big contest that we had going, everybody saying, well, stratas Stratas aren't going to be able to afford the increase in strata fees, or they're not going to fund this, or they're going to protest against it. All of those claims just simply didn't unfold. They're not true. Strata corporations have actually really embraced depreciation reports because they've discovered that, geez, by increasing strata fees by $15 a month for the next 10 years, we'll have enough money to replace the roof without a special levy. And when they start to put it down into small numbers and it makes sense to the owners, it's really been remarkable how high the involvement has been on a voluntary basis with depreciation reports. So it's a good thing, right? Now, stratas can exempt, but they need a 3/4 vote to exempt. And if they don't get a 3/4 vote to exempt, that's an annual vote, then they must have the report done within 6 months. So even stratas that were exempting are finding that it's getting harder and harder for people to sell units in their buildings, and so they're turning around and they're getting the reports done. And so it's had a really positive effect on the community, definitely.
Great. I'll go to Vanessa. We have a question online.
Is there a way to check if the developer is reliable?
Dan, do you want
to? What has worked for me and my clients is that we will talk to people that have bought in that developer's units in the past, in the recent past, and how happy have they been living there. You can, and it's amazing what you can find out by just Googling a developer's name online. You will find amazing things and stuff that I'm sure some of them would wish weren't there. And the other thing I've done is I've looked at, I've talked to my realtor friends. If I'm dealing, one of my buyers is dealing in a building that I don't have any experience with, or a developer that I've never dealt with, I will see who has bought units from that developer in the past and talk to them. Or even talk to, I would ask your realtor to talk to people that have bought resales in buildings from that developer, or talk to the sellers who moved out of there. Why did they move out of there? Was it anything to do with the developer? So there are ways of checking them out.
Great. Maybe we'll take one more question, and then did you have one back there too? Okay, we'll take a couple more.
For the gentleman from the Condominium Association, a two-part question. First of all, is there a legal requirement from the government for condominium associations to turn their depreciation reports over to some department in the government for their having them there to know they've been done and have a copy? And the more important second question is, if there is such a requirement, is there public access to the collection of all of those depreciation reports somewhere on a website or by going to an office, so someone could do some advanced research before considering a particular condominium because they've looked at a whole bunch of these depreciation reports?
So answer to your first question is pretty simple, no. There is no such thing as a public registry. The Strata Property Act is self-regulating legislation. It's not regulated by government. But if a Strata corporation has had a report done, they must disclose it if a Form B is requested. Many strata corporations have their own websites, and many of them even publish publicly their depreciation reports on their websites. Again, Google is a great resource. If you know the strata plan numbers, Google the strata plan number or the address, and you may find that the condo has a website and has loads of documents published and available for people to look at. But all the documents are required to be disclosed. I think another document that's pretty critical when you get an information certificate, the strata corporations, buyers often don't request information that could disclose valuable information to them. And here's a good example. The insurance policy of the Strata Corporation is a great document to request. If the water escape deductible on an insurance policy shows that the deductible has been stable around $5,000 or $10,000 for a flood in the building, it's a pretty good indication there haven't been a lot of problems. But if you look at the policy and you see that the water deductible is $50,000 or $100,000, it's a red flag right away. there's either been constant floods, or there's been damage in a building, or the plumbing systems are failing. There are indications that there may be other issues. Another document you can ask for as a buyer, you can ask for any environmental or engineering documents that have ever been produced for the Strata Corporation. And so if the Strata's ever had a building envelope condition assessment, an environmental assessment for asbestos or other types of materials, the Strata has an obligation to disclose those. So, you know, everybody says, well, sure, we asked for it, but what if they don't disclose it? Well, if they don't disclose it and there turns out to be a failure, then you have some recourse against the Strata in that event. And that's where the tribunal has really come in to be very effective. Tribunal cost is about the same as small claims. It's a couple $100, and you can get an effective order either for damages, or you can get an order for the Strata to disclose or produce documents or to actually do something. And that's made quite a difference to users and to condo owners in the province. So, you know, avail yourself of the information that's at hand with most of the Stratas, but a lot of the records and documents are public, and so look for them. Should we have a public registry? It's not a bad idea. The difficulty is documents and information changes constantly. And who's going to be responsible to update those registries whenever there are any changes? The smallest change in a document or disclosure could be really a substantial material change. So when you're wanting to buy something, you want the most current documents available to you at all times.
We'll take one last question we had back there. No? Okay, great. Maybe I'll move to the closing. As we closed our last panel, we'll ask the presenters for one nugget for first-timer home buyers. And why don't we start with you, Adrian?
I'd say, like, I did the whole, you know, first kid, I'm living in a condo downtown. Second kid, oh, now I need a house. I got to go buy a 2,500 square foot house in North Van, and why am I unhappy? You know, like, I've done this whole sort of treadmill of, you know, growing a family, and your needs change, and you're just sort of following a script, and you're not really thinking about what you need. And I guess the biggest thing you can possibly ask yourself is what kind of life you want to lead. Do you want to lead a healthier life where you have more time with your kids and you're not working as much and you're not spending your time in traffic? And I think, you know, I can't imagine anybody not wanting those things. And kids don't need a huge amount of space. And I think what they need is they need time with you. They need your love. They need your attention. They're not going to get that if you're spending 2 hours a day in a car. You know, they need a healthy, active life, and that's a great, you know, walkable Vancouver is a great place to do that. So I guess, you know, try to put aside what people expect you to do in terms of getting a house and getting a nice car, and save that money and put it into experiences and things and people you care about, really.
Thanks. Dan?
After you make those lifestyle decisions and you do decide you want to buy a condominium, probably the next important step, as I said earlier, is find a realtor. But when you're buying condominium, you want to make sure that you're dealing with your representative that really understands the process. It bothers me when I see my fellow realtors hand the stack of documents. Actually, now we email them because they're all digital now. But I mean, I've seen realtors actually hand the whole envelope to their buyer and say, you know, read these by next week when we have to remove subjects. You know, your realtor should be walking through those documents with you. They are dealing with condominium properties all the time. They know what to look for, and make sure that they're helping you go through that process. Make sure they're putting little stickies on the parts that you need to read. You know, and the perfect building has never been built, and there's lots of challenges. And even reading through minutes, you see patterns, and when you read them all the time, you know what to look for. So make sure your realtor is prepared to do that for you. And you know, and like I said, do the interviews. Find out, is my realtor going to be representing me and looking out for my best interests? So do the extra homework at the beginning, and you'll make sure you're prepared and get the right information to get the right transaction.
Thanks. Tony?
Well, when most people buy a condo, it's going to be their single most large investment of their life, and it'll be somewhere between $250,000 to anywhere up to $15 or $20 million. And do the math. For a couple $100, you can request all the documents of the Strata Corporation. Take the time to read them. every time you purchase, subject to review of the documents is an acceptable subject. The difficulty we have right at this time is we have a seller's market where there's a lot of competition. People are still buying without reviewing documents and without subjects, and they're putting themselves into a really high level of jeopardy. Take the extra week's time that you need to get all of the documents, to read the documents, to be able to make an informed decision, because it's your only chance to stop yourself from getting into an investment that's going to expose you to a lot of liability. The other thing is read the bylaws. Don't just believe what somebody's told you. Don't get a summary that says pets are allowed, you can have rentals, but we have an age restriction, but you only have one parking space. Look closely at each of the bylaws and make sure you clearly understand them. Bylaws are complicated. They're not as simple as people would like you to think that they are. And I tell everybody, when you move into a strata, just think you're moving into a building with all of your in-laws. So, you know, they're not necessarily people you would have lived with, but they're people that are going to be your neighbors. And you need to put a little bit of perspective on this, that you're going to have some harmony, and you're going to have patience with each other, but understanding clearly what the bylaws say is going to make it that much easier for you. So take all the time you need to review documents before you purchase a condo.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Before we break, just a reminder to fill out your condo card, stamp it at the marketplace. It is your ticket for fabulous door prizes. There is also a survey in your bag, and the prize for filling out that is a $300 Home Depot gift card. For those of you online, please join us for our next session at 7 o'clock. That session is What Product is Right for Me? For those in the audience, we're going to take a 10-minute break. The presenters will be out at the marketplace if you have any other questions you want to ask of them. But before we go, please join me in thanking Adrian, Dan, and Tony for a very thoughtful discussion.
More than an address or a structure, a home is the building block of family and society that gathers us and holds us together, no matter where we're from. We open the door and feel secure in our place in the community, in our country. Your own apartment, your own home, your own place to make memories, take comfort, and build a better future. It is a powerful ideal that is linked by the strongest of bonds to our identity as a nation. That's why for more than 70 years, no single organization has been more fundamental to building an inclusive housing system than Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. From the biggest cities to the smallest towns of this vast country, housing matters to all Canadians. Helping Canadians meet their housing needs is what we do. Our nationally available mortgage loan insurance facilitates access to rental housing and allows qualified Canadians to become homeowners. Just as important is ensuring our lenders have reliable access to funds. providing more choices for Canadians to find a mortgage, no matter where they live. That's good for the home buyer, for our housing system, and for the financial stability of our country. When it comes to opening doors for Canadians, our people are at the forefront, offering support, guidance, and expertise in the field, and creating comprehensive tools and resources for housing sector professionals. The research we do and the data we collect and analyze allows us to provide unrivaled insight to an evolving marketplace. It helps mortgage professionals become more informed about what their clients want and expect. It allows developers to supply properties that meet those demands, and it informs decisions by all levels of government on policy and investment in Canada's housing market. We know adequate housing creates the conditions for success. Working with our partners, we help support affordable housing for all Canadians, including seniors, Indigenous, low-income households, and other vulnerable people in Canada. Our quality of life is considered one of the best in the world. It's no accident that Canada's housing system is held up as an example of what we can all accomplish when we use innovation and passion to keep moving forward. Home is at the heart of our country. For many Canadians, it starts with us.
Maintaining your home takes a little more effort than a coat of paint or a weekly lawn mow in the summer. It costs money to maintain it and takes energy to run it. Think of all the different places that energy goes, like running your fridge or heating your water. How do you maximize efficiency and get the best value? It starts by choosing the right energy for the right use. And using electricity and natural gas in the right places provides an equal combination of that comfort, convenience, and efficiency. Burgers on the grill? With natural gas, you'll never have to lift a heavy propane tank again or worry about running out of fuel. With natural gas, you have so many choices. It starts when you choose to include it as part of a balanced energy mix.
Nearly every day we access global information. We also want to communicate, connect, and be entertained. Speed makes a world of difference. The revolutionary TELUS Pure Fiber network delivers the lightning-fast access you crave. Fiberglass strands transport information close to the speed of light, and with more than enough bandwidth for you and your neighbors, you'll have reliable, instant access anytime you want.
TELUS Pure Fiber allows me to upload just as fast as I can download. It allows me to keep in touch with my very international family. It allows me to work from home and video conference with colleagues and clients from all over the world.
Being on the Strata, my thing from the building perspective is that we're set up for the future. So no matter where technology goes, whether we're going to be streaming a lot and using a lot more data, we have the infrastructure in place for years and years to come. We won't have to change anything for decades.
I'd recommend TELUS. It's all just been pick up the phone, call your rep, they deal with it. The technical side gets dealt with, and then the construction side gets dealt with.
Future-proof technologies within our buildings will allow all our users to access all the applications and all the new technologies that are coming forward in various ways and in ways that we haven't even thought of yet.
Unleash the value of fiber to the home with the TELUS Pure Fiber network. Get connected today.
I'm with the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association. We are a not-for-profit organization with 1,000 plus members representing developers, builders, home renovators, designers, architects, industry professionals, and suppliers. And we work with governments, communities, and other provincial and federal policy agencies on various issues important to our members and you, the home buyer. Tonight, you've got your bags. Please don't forget about filling out the survey and your condo cards for chances to win prizes. We will be drawing the prizes tomorrow and notifying winners. Now I would like to thank our sponsor. The kind support of our sponsors that we offer these programs at no charge. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Shane Ramsey, from the CEO from BC Housing, and he will moderate this next session. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Don. Thanks, Don, and welcome back to our third and final session tonight, What Product is Right for Me? As we have done with the first two sessions, I'll introduce each panelist. I'll ask a series of questions and then turn it over to you. For those of you online, remember to type your questions into the chat room provided in the sidebar on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Vanessa will keep track of those. So without further ado, our panelist tonight, to my right, is Scott Brown. He's the president and CEO of Fifth Avenue Real Estate Marketing. He is responsible for delivering sales success and developer partner satisfaction. Through his 28 years of work experience, Scott has formed and led teams that have set sales records in North America and Asia. He will be sharing insight on emerging housing markets and trending millennial neighborhoods. Next to Scott, development and marketing manager for Zentera Developments. They specialize in wood frame ground-oriented townhouses. He's been an active member in the real estate industry since 2009, and he will share insights on pre-sales and various housing products. And to my far right is Wendy Atchison. Wendy is the VP and Registrar for BC Housing. She has more than 20 years experience in the licensing and regulation of professionals, as well as legal matters, government housing, and consumer protection. She is responsible for administering the Homeowner Protection Act for BC Housing. That's the agency that regulates builders who have to be licensed to build units for sale in British Columbia, oversees the mandatory warranty program. Wendy will be talking about the licensing system as well as the home warranty and insurance products. So without further ado, I will turn to a couple of questions, and perhaps I'll start with Scott. With so many developments to choose from across Metro Vancouver, can you offer buyers a strategy how to narrow down a product and choices that are right for them?
Well, it's interesting in the market what's happening right now with strata properties or condominiums, and I sat in on the earlier sessions and quite enjoyed them, found them informative. We just put out a research report called The Fifth Dimension on the entire Metro Vancouver market, and the thing that's interesting is that strange things are happening. The strata product is becoming mainstream accepted, whether it's townhomes or condominiums, and it actually outperformed the existing home sales market, which was off 40% last year because of the tail end of the foreign buyer tax. And the strata property market was up 17% over a previous record year, or outperformed it by 40%. So the amount of strata development throughout Metro Vancouver, and the millennials and the older buyers that are starting to understand this now as an acceptable form of product that meets their needs. So generally, when people are finding a strategy, you still have to think about where you love to live and how you want to live your life with that. And for some people, like the gentleman earlier who wants to rent and live with 5 kids in a condo, have at it. But that's important because it matches his lifestyle. And I think for a lot of couples, where they really struggle with when they're making changes in their lifestyle, older buyers, is really getting alignment around those how we want to live. And there are many opportunities for those people who want to stay within 15, 20 minutes of their children but are moving east to realize a little bit more value, selling their single-family home, moving east, but they're looking for neighborhoods that are pedestrian-oriented, that are enjoyable, that are safe, and those opportunities are there. But as you get out into some of the suburbs, there are certain product types, like master on the main townhomes, low maintenance, 2,000 square feet, either a small basement or an upper loft, but you can live on a master on the main and still have a small yard. That product type is only available in certain neighborhoods, like Murrayville. And what happens is buyers flock from the west side of Vancouver into those neighborhoods and buy that product up. They buy it up at prices that are higher than that neighborhood had paid, but that to them, coming from the west side of the market, is really just, to them, just an unbelievably low price for that. So I think you still have to get aligned on your lifestyles and think about how you want to live, and realize that some of these neighborhoods in Metro Vancouver, you can poo-poo things like Surrey, but if you haven't been there lately, or if you haven't been to Murrayville or Maple Ridge or these kinds of places, there's a lot of development that has changed, and the livability and the pedestrian orientation and the civic amenities that are available, it's surprising people, and you're seeing people, young people, move back to South Surrey even for that, where 10 years ago there wasn't anything like Grandview. You realize today it's a lot of rebound buyers coming back. The last thing I'd say about that strategy-wise is if you're buying by yourself or you're buying as a couple, get aligned on one thing, not only what your lifestyle and your needs are, but what's the one inconvenience you're both or you are most willing to accept. Because just like there's no perfect building, there's no perfect housing option. And generally we find most consumers have to get agreement and accept one major inconvenience in their purchase thing. And when they get over that one major inconvenience, it might be neighborhood, it might be commute time, or it's something, but they get that out of the way, it's a lot less stressful for them when they start looking at property. I think too many people look at property before they actually think about those lifestyle needs and inconveniences. And to your last comment, the realtor before, we find, yes, we represent developers, but we find that there are a handful of realtors that do a really good job of understanding their customers' needs before they come in and see us and actually representing them as a trusted advisor. And frankly, I think there's a lot of realtors out there that I'd really encourage to do a better job with that. Spend more time with your customer before you come see us.
Thank you, Scott. Turning to Derek, what demand are you seeing for current market inventory and for pre-sale developments? And maybe you can talk about some of Zentara's recent developments.
Absolutely, Shane. Before I really want to start, I just want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. It's really good seeing a lot of people seeing and really trying to get the information out before they make that big step to making that big purchase, probably one of the biggest purchases of their lives. So kudos to you for all coming out this evening. On our end, there's three typical things I've been really seeing, and what we're really seeing is that on the supply side, we are exceptionally short on supply. That's not changing. Geographically, nothing's really changed. To the north, we have the North Shore Mountains. To the west, we have the Pacific Ocean. To the east, we have the ALR, and to the south, we have the U.S.-Canada border. So we are locked in a setup where we do not have much available inventory to really expand to. So that's not changing. On the demand side, we're still seeing huge demand on our end. Obviously, the last couple of years, we've seen an exceptionally bullish market. We're seeing huge records that are set. And one thing that the media has really portrayed in the last probably 2 quarters is that there's been a slight change. There's less transactions that are happening. But an example I want to use is if you're going down the highway at 200 kilometers an hour and you put the brakes onto 120, you're still moving quickly. It's just that we're not seeing those same records. So, from a developer's perspective, we're still very confident in what's happening. And then one of the other really drivers that we're seeing is that for borrowing money is the interest rates. Now, for first-time home buyers, you probably would have to talk to some of your parents typically. But I wasn't around at this time, but in the early 1980s, you were basically seeing interest rates that were in 19, 20, 21%. That's credit card rates. And so if you took a condo these days, take a $300,000 condo, and you put in an interest rate from typically right now these days you can mid twos type thing, and you put in 20% interest rate, that's a huge substantial change. So what we're seeing is that buyers have a lot of available equity to them for borrowing, just because of the fact it's so inexpensive to borrow. So touching on our point, Shane, about what we're seeing on some of our pre-sale developments, we had a site down in South Surrey, and we launched it May of last year, and just exceptional amount of demand. And we saw it everywhere across the Lower Mainland. People lining up overnight. There was a project in Langley that people lined up for 2 weeks beforehand. And we're still seeing some record numbers that are coming out. There's a new development coming in downtown Vancouver, Alberni by Westbank, and they're trying to hit new targets of $2,500 a square foot, which is, I'm not saying that's first-time home buyer standards, but the market is still demanding on that. So what we are seeing from the developer side is that there's an increasing demand on apartments and townhomes, just because the single-family market has just went on an exceptionally bullish run, which I mentioned earlier. So people are just trying to get in the market, and we're staying very confident about it.
Great. Maybe I'll stay with you, Derek. One of the questions that first-time home buyers sometimes have are, what are some of the positives and negatives between concrete and wood frame construction?
Great question, Shane. So depending on where you're purchasing, obviously it is going to influence what you're actually looking for and what you're actually going to have available. So typically, if you're looking for concrete, it's typically just going to be more expensive. Just the cost of construction is going to be higher, and therefore it's going to be a direct representation of what your end purchase price for the consumer is. Also, a couple of other things that come into play with that is just some of the amenities typically can be a little bit better just because you can amortize that over more units. But according to that, or a junction with that as well, is that you're going to see higher strata fees. So for example, a high-rise downtown, you might be at 40, 50 cents a square foot for strata, whereas you take a wood frame product, you might be in the 9, 10, 11 cent range. So you have to take that in consideration when you look at your absolute monthly cost, not just your mortgage, but your strata fees, utility fees, just everything that goes into it. On the wood frame side, as I mentioned, it is going to be a little bit more affordable in that. And one of the key differences as well in BC, we typically see you don't go above 6-story for wood frame, whereas for the high rise for concrete, you can go to the Shangri-La, which is mid 60s, low 60 stories. So you have to decide what kind of lifestyle you're looking for. For a lot of people, they might not necessarily want to be living in a high rise. It's just up to you. So the positive and negatives, there are costs associated with it. Also, where you're actually going to be seeing people for where you actually want to live, and those are some of the influences you're going to see.
Great, thanks, Derek. Wendy, maybe you can describe for us the warranty that you get on a new home and what it covers, and then maybe some of the considerations when folks are looking at a resale and what they should be looking for in terms of warranty coverage.
Yeah, sure, Shane. So for a brand new home, and even actually a resale home that's up to 10 years old, one of the advantages of buying a new home is that obviously not only do you have a home that doesn't have any wear and tear, it's nice, new and shiny, but it's also less likely to have defects. But I kind of liked what Scott said earlier. There's no such thing as a perfect building. So you may buy a brand new home and think that you will get a perfect building, and there may be a few construction defects. And the good news is that for all new homes in strata buildings and most single-family homes in BC, there's this mandatory home warranty insurance. So you're actually protected from construction defects for this policy of home warranty insurance up to 10 years. And that 10-year coverage for the first year, if you brought it brand new, for the very first year, it's going to cover general construction defects. It might be a chipped tile or a torn carpet or a rattly doorknob. And you'll be able to actually claim for those defects and get those things fixed. You've got a 2-year coverage for heating, electrical, ventilation, air conditioning, plumbing systems. So that's a 2-year coverage. You got 5-year coverage on building envelopes. So that would be your windows, doors, roof, balcony if you have one. That would be a 5-year coverage. And then 10 years on the actual structure of the building. And that would be your foundation, it would be your parkade if your strata was built on a parkade, the walls. So that's quite a long coverage if you do have any construction defects for those potential imperfections in the building. And what happens with that is that you can make a claim. It's free claim. There's no deductible. If you're in a strata, it'll actually be your unit. If there's anything in your unit for those first 2 years, you'd make the claim on your own policy. And then the Strata Corporation also has a policy, and they will be responsible for making a claim for any common area coverage. So that would be both the structural and the building envelope, if there's anything wrong with the building envelope or the structure of the building, as well as any common areas of the strata. And that would be the case for resale as well, as long as the resale still had some coverage on it. And what I would recommend there is to check our new home registry on the BC Housing website. All new homes in BC are registered with us first. So you can actually go on there, search online for free to see if there's coverage. It'll tell you who the licensed builder is. It will tell you who the insurance company is if you do need to make a claim. And it'll tell you when the policy actually commenced as well.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. Maybe we'll go back to Scott. Any comments on what neighborhoods are trending with millennial buyers?
Well, obviously, transit-oriented development is very popular. and so you can see that in a number of, pretty much anywhere where there's a SkyTrain. You see what's happened on North Road in Coquitlam and up in the Como-Clark area, and that area has just gone off. That is both younger buyers and investors who think that younger buyers will want to rent there. What we're also seeing, though, is that we're seeing a rebound from people who came downtown and they're now returning. So the North Shore and Lynn Creek, there's people that want to go back to the North Shore, could not afford it at all, and now the Lynn Creek area, the south area of Lynn Valley, is starting to emerge, and it's got relatively better value for a new buyer, and they're going back, and we're seeing certain people in Lynn Valley, including younger buyers, say, you know what, I want to live on the North Shore, I'm willing to accept a 3-bedroom apartment, I don't ever need to get into the single family business of, $1.5 million, $6 million, but I need the space, and so maybe I can afford a townhome in 4 or 5 years, but I'm buying these 3 bedrooms. So I see it in Port Coquitlam, younger people migrating there because Port Moody's prices are lifting up quite a bit. You see in Abbotsford people as well moving out to Abbotsford, going from, say, from either Burnaby or New Westminster and trying Abbotsford first. And what they often do is, it's funny, I was in Abbotsford once, and a lot of our proposals and research reports I write in either coffee shops or pubs. So I was sitting because we're doing work in Abbotsford, I like to sit in local coffee shops in the historic downtown and just watch people and think about their stories and see what they're looking for. So I was sitting there with this couple, and they saw I was working, and they asked what I did. And they said they were out there, and they'd been living there for a month, and they were in the pub, and they'd bought near there, and they got a home bigger than they thought they could get because they could afford it. They found they really liked the historic downtown. They could walk to a couple of pubs and a little coffee shop. So they were quite surprised. So since one of them worked downtown and one worked out towards Surrey, the one said, I don't have to go downtown every day. I fly. So they moved out there. But I think a lot of these little neighborhoods like that, the Willoughby area in Langley, you see it as well. In terms of South Surrey, you're seeing a lot of people wanting to live in the Grandview area that are willing to not live a single family home, great schools, great neighborhoods. And usually what we're seeing as well is the employment base is shifting. And we're seeing more and more people that actually don't drive into Vancouver for work anymore. And so one person usually will drive 20 to 30 minutes, but the other person might only be 10 to 15. The last area I'd say attention to that I think is going to be really emerging is that there's a lot of people don't understand what's actually happening in Surrey City Centre. And with the infrastructure, and now their 50-story tower almost done, 3 Civic Plaza, the 5-star hotel that's going in there. There are 10,000 people in the next 12 to 18 months, young people, older people, moving into Surrey City Centre. That place is so under food and beverage for that much demand. But think about what 10,000 new residents does for the livability. And it's actually highly pedestrian oriented, and it is on SkyTrain. And those younger buyers, like many south of the Fraser, actually view Vancouver as an amenity that I want to go to once or twice a month. But Vancouver to them is not the be-all and the end-all. But if they're working at Surrey Memorial Hospital or they're working somewhere else, they do want to live on transit, so they have that option. And they do like the density of high-rise communities. But they're not necessarily sold on maybe that the holy grail is to live in downtown Vancouver.
Great, thank you, Scott. Turning to Derek, one of the areas we wanted to canvass, when buyers are looking at new developments, do you have any comments on the types of amenities that the building offers and the kind of costs and benefits of those amenities?
For a lot of purchasers, if you're really looking at it, you want to see what is important to you. Effectively, how much time are you actually going to be spending at home, and what amenities are actually available in the area? For example, if your community has a pool, for example, that's great. But if there's a brand new rec center that's 3 blocks away, do you really need to use it? Our firm, we did a study, and one of the studies we did was seeing when we were planning one of our future developments was what kind of space do residents want to see. And we did the study. What we did was for a lot of past purchasers as well as a lot of our registrants that came through was that what is kind of the key amenity they want to see. And one of the big ones that came was we want a pool. And we're like, okay, well we've done some of our past developments and we've never done pools. And we kind of dug a little deeper into it. It's like, well, okay, we did this study in August, in the hottest time of the year. And we did the exact same study because we weren't totally set on this. And what we found was that we did the exact same study, but in October, November, and no one wanted a pool. And typically what we find is that for people that are using amenities, gyms are really important to people just because if you're getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you want to go, or 5 o'clock in the morning, or whatever time you're getting up, be having that effectively available to you. So for some of our past communities, some of the key things that people have wanted to do is theater spaces, party rooms, board meetings, just for in case that people have like they work from home, they want to have people over for some of their business consulting meetings. And what we're seeing for a lot of first-time homeowners is that obviously the gym. We're also seeing just some small play areas that if they have young families, there's no point in doing a small play area if it's a master on main community, which is typically what Scott said earlier. These are people that are going to be right-sizing buyers, and I say right-sizers because a lot of people associate them with downsizers, but I feel that downsizers may have a little bit of negative connotation to it. With the right-sizers, what they're doing is they're empty nesters. They've effectively had people. Their children have moved out, and they're getting a home that's better set for them. So Shane, coming back to the fact that you're talking about what amenities some of first-time homeowners or just purchasers might be looking for, just be aware that these amenities do come at a cost. And typically, if it is in a massive community, if it's like in a 20 or 30 unit community, there are associated operating costs with these. So you do have to keep that in consideration that if you're a smaller community, you want a big pool or something like that, you are going to have higher strata fees.
Great, thanks, Dirk. Wendy, if you buy a unit and you encounter issues, some defect issues, what course of action should a homeowner take?
Well, it partly depends on whether you're living in a strata or a single-family home. If you're in a single-family home, then you're responsible for all any defects that come up as far as making a claim. But really, it is about making a claim. Those the 1, 2, 5, 10 policy limits. It's really important to know when your policy limit is coming up. So that you can make a claim in time. And you have to, if you're going to make a claim for a defect for any of those various items that I was talking about, you do need to make it in writing to both your insurer and the builder. And you'll know that it'll have that information on the policy, and you can also check that on the new home registry. And it's okay, a lot of people will work with their builder. Ultimately, most of the time it's the builder that's going to come back and fix those defects anyway. So it's fine to have that good relationship with the builder. Most good builders, they have good customer service departments. They will want to make your home right for you. If there are a few defects here and there, they'll want to do that. They'll be glad to do that. But we always advise to make sure that you lock that claim in writing, to make sure you send it to the insurance company as well. Just so that you don't, especially for the 1-year items, if you go over that 1-year limit, then they could actually deny the claim because it's gone over the 1 year if you don't put it in writing. So by all means, work with your builder, but make sure that you put your claim in writing as well.
And your claim in writing goes to the insurance company?
It does go to the insurance company and to the builder,
Right.
so to both of those.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. One last question, and this may be for Scott or Derek. Do you have any tips for how an interested buyer gets into a pre-sale situation, or some tips around what things a buyer should look for?
Well, because of what Derek said about supply, generally if you want to buy townhomes, especially in the Vancouver market and the Metro Vancouver market as a whole, you have to be comfortable buying off of looking at the display home, but not actually purchasing that home, but purchasing a home you're going to have to wait for completion. But what I can tell you is a couple of things, is that generally if you find a community you like, if you tend to buy in at the earliest stages in a new townhome development, you'll typically see the best prices. Because prices are, the developers like to get momentum and keep the banks happy, and then they'll move their pricing up through that. So normally, and in these markets, you see very little discounting at all through the phases of a community. So if you're budget conscious and you want to try to get the value, try to get into early phases of condominium projects and of townhome projects. One little inconvenience with it on the townhome side. Typically, if you buy early, you just have to put up with a little bit of construction for 6 months or 12 months while other people who bought after you's homes are completed. You get the better price, but you got a little bit of an inconvenience there.
Derek?
Yeah, a couple other things that I just want to add on to that as well. So if you're trying to get into a new community early, is obviously the power of the internet is something you need to touch base upon. And for a lot of our new developments that we do is that you can go on our website, you can see the actual feature project, and what you can do is just register with it, register with that project that is. And what that allows you to do is that we will be sending out the most up-to-date information, whether it be the floor plans, the site plans, the pricing, launch dates, any of that kind of critical information that you need to know, just so you have maybe a leg up if you really see a desirable community that you want to be part of. Another second option you can also do is talk to a realtor who specializes in that area. You can Google through them, maybe have a friend that refers you, and these people may have an inside track, or they might have a networking opportunity that they just know someone that may have a little bit more insight than the average buyer. And thirdly, another item that I want to touch base on is the fact that if you have a developer or builder who's multiple projects, you might be able to even go to some of their other sales sites and just talk to them, like, hey, do you have any further information on ABC project in this neighborhood? They might be able to give you a little bit of insight, just in the sense that, for example, hey, we're looking at ABC neighborhood, we see that you have ABC site, and just want to see what time do you think that sales might commence. And what that'll allow you to do is it might just give you a little bit of seeing what your kind of buying platform is and seeing what kind of buying schedule you might be on. So if it's going to be coming out in November later that year, take the steps you need to do. Get pre-approved. Get all your financing in order to really get yourself prepared. That when Scott was saying was that so you can get tap into that best pricing.
Great, thanks, Derek. Now we'll turn it over to you. Any comments, questions from the audience or those online? Anybody? Vanessa.
This is a question for Wendy. Does the 2-5-10 warranty apply to amenities as well?
Yes, it does apply to amenities. There's general defect coverage for amenities for 15 months in a strata, so the common areas of the property, including things like pools and gyms. And that would be the Strata Corporation's responsibility to put a claim in if there were any problems with those amenities.
Question here?
As a buyer of resale, what assurances do you have that the developer actually starts the project when they say they're going to start the project? Because I've seen a lot sit for 18 months. And you've got 25% in it.
It's not so much that you have insurances of when they're going to start. It's that in your contract and in the disclosure, there's very specific dates that they have to complete by. And yes, they do have a grace period after that, but it's really that period. What you'll find too is though that and that most developers will be realistic about that time frame as well. So it's really about the outside date that you can expect to get your home. And most of the homes, like in townhomes, you're not usually putting in 5 to 10, you're usually not putting in 20% deposits anyway. And usually your completion on a townhome is quite quick. It's usually 6 months to a year. Whereas when you get into larger scale developments, yes, then you can be dealing with 2 or 3 years of construction. And those usually do take 20% deposits. So your money's protected in getting it back, but the longer term, yeah, you're not generating a return on that money. But again, it's the outside date, not so much the start date that you want to be keeping an eye on.
Any comments, Derek? No.
I think the only big thing I was just touch base or add on to Scott's is that when you sell on your contract of purchase and sale, you are going to have that estimate completion date. And when you're looking at that, the developer is bound just within the disclosure statement to really actually fulfill those requirements. And when Scott's saying about these outside dates, typically within a disclosure statement, you're also going to have a commencement period of when that building is supposed to be starting on time. Okay, usually it's about 90 days, give or take. And obviously there are some things that do come into play if there are delays in construction. For example, we've had a lot of snow this year by Vancouver standards, and I think, at least on our end, we just want to ensure that if we try and rush things, it's not going to benefit the buyer in the long run because we want to make sure things are done properly. And on our end, a big thing that we also wanted to ensure is that all of our product is to the level and expectation that when you did that pre-sale purchase, that we live up to those expectations. So if there are any delays, it could also be led from maybe a later labor shortage as well, just because the market has been so hot as well.
I think there's a couple points on that related to it too, is that goes back to supply, that the municipal approval departments are sort of built for one size fits all, and they're not keeping up with the consumer demand, and the amount of time it's taking to get a project to approval is affecting things. And that affects your comment about timing. Sometimes the reason why some of these projects are delayed in starts is they have sufficient pre-sales, but they're waiting on their building permit, and they can't actually commence the construction without a building permit. And we've had projects that we've been able to get all the pre-sales required in 60 days or so, and we've had to wait 6 or 8 months for a building permit before they could actually start construction. So obviously that purchaser who bought 6 or 8 months ago knows we're still going to be on time. But why we're not able to progress is because we don't have a building permit, because the department's backed up.
And actually, one other comment I want to add to that as well, and this is a real world example, and this is legitimately happening to me with right now. I'm not going to name the municipality that I'm dealing with, but it legitimately took me 9 weeks to get a phone call back. 9 weeks. So if that's just for something really simple, 9 weeks for a phone call back, and I'm not trying to throw any municipality under the bus. It's just because they are so smoking busy with how much development that is happening, is that these are some of the delays that we're faced with, just sheer manpower.
We have a question here.
What's the worst scenario if the developer couldn't finish the project? So, because I know that you have to pay deposit to sometimes in trust account. So, what's will happen if? Do you have any?
We've not had any projects in Metro Vancouver that I'm aware of, and we do lots of research on this stuff, that have not actually completed. Even in 2009, there were a couple that were close, they were still able to complete. However, the legislation around real estate development protects the purchaser, so those deposits have to be returned to you if the project doesn't complete. So that's good, you get your money back. The challenge is if you got your money back on something you bought 3 years ago, unfortunately didn't happen to anybody, the prices are up 50, 60%, so you're out buying with a little bit less buying power, but you did get your deposit back. I've worked in other countries where you don't get your deposit back. It's a little scarier.
Vanessa, a question online?
Lauren asks, can you run into problems buying a pre-sale condo if you are a pet owner?
I would say it really comes down to the disclosure statement. They are going to outline what pets you are allowed. For example, it might be 1 dog, 1 cat, or two of the other. You do have to be aware that some stratas do have requirements on the breed of dogs, just because there are some more aggressive ones, like a Rottweiler or Pit Bull, for example. I personally have no issues with them, but there are some stratas that do have that incorporated, and that's effectively the biggest ones that we have.
Particularly towards condominiums, like in your townhome projects, it's pet friendly. It's just like a single family home. But in condominiums, almost all our projects are moving towards pet friendly. Same as you though, cautions around certain size of dog or breed. And that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't buy, but generally that the bylaws are really clear, laid out in the document as to what they're trying to avoid, which is dangerous dogs or particularly large dogs.
Any other questions from the audience? Well, we've heard a lot about deposits.
I think you have some.
We do have, great.
I've lived and worked in Vancouver for going on 73 years. I've never heard of Murrayville, and I have no idea where it is.
It's a great area.
Yeah, historic Murrayville is a part of the township of Langley, kind of the southeastern corridor. And there's a spot called Five Corners there. And there's an amazing coffee shop that still has the original floors in it from the 1940s. And they have live music still on Fridays and Saturday nights. It's a bit like, have you ever been to Fort Langley? It's a southern version of Fort Langley. It's got a lot of charm. Those who know it love it a lot. They got a really good pub, the Murrayville Pub. So I encourage you to go out for a little adventure and have lunch at Five Corners and take a look around. But that area was originally all sold for people that wanted to retire, who were living within 15, 20 minutes in single family homes. And then North Shore people, Coquitlam people came out and went, this is charming. This is more like what the North Shore was like 20 years ago. Little smaller town feel, but all those amenities are there.
And if you're wanting more of an address, it's about 221st and 49th-ish. It's about the approximate location for that neighborhood.
We have a question here.
You mentioned that, if the project has not been completed, and then the deposit will be returned to the buyer. But as you mentioned, also 3 years down the road, the prices will be increased. So my question is whether the developer will compensate for that kind of loss.
You have to look at every case-by-case basis and what's in the disclosure statement. As again, that's not happened in Vancouver, so the developers not have to compensate.
Yeah.
But sometimes the developer might offer a small term of interest or something like that. But again, this has not happened, right? So what could cause that to happen? You know, again, we went through a major global recession and it didn't happen.
Any other final? Yeah, we got one back there, Michael.
Two questions. The first is, it's common in the industry to say you can either buy a townhouse or you can buy a condominium. But of course, you all know that's a misnomer because most townhouses are condominium tenure too. But we use the term. However, we're now starting to see townhouses being built that are not condominiums, that are fee simple or freehold individually owned. Can you comment on what might be the advantages or disadvantages of one over the other? The other thing is, on the interview this morning on CBC, reference was made to the idea of getting a mortgage helper in an apartment. It's an idea that was started up at Simon Fraser University. Would you like to comment on the idea or the possibility of someone buying a 2 or 3 bedroom unit and actually being able to rent out the 3 bedroom unit until they have that second, third, fourth, or fifth child?
Just so the audience knows, that is one of the smartest people in Metro Vancouver on the real estate. So those aren't layup questions he's asking. He could probably answer those questions himself. So what I'll answer, maybe you can answer the fee simple one. I'll answer the one. In Abbotsford at one point, we were able to do a townhome development. And we were able to actually, because of the grade of the site, do a portion, 50%, Michael, had legal suites. Those were sold as mortgage helpers, and those sold first and fast. I'd love to see more of that product.
And then just on the fee simple side, so obviously, you know, for most townhomes that are out there, you're going to have a strata associated with it. But on the fee simple side, it's going to be strata free. So you actually have an entitlement to the actual unit itself. So one thing that I am a little bit hesitant with it is just because some of the shared wall agreements that you are going to have with the actual fee simple, with the actually some of the roof lines, just with various neighbors, and it's just the corporation side of it from a strata. It makes things a little bit more organized from that sense, because you actually have someone that's able to manage everything if there are any issues that do arise. With a fee simple, you just need to be nice with your neighbors, and it'll work out for you.
Any other comments, questions? Yeah, we'll take one from online. Vanessa?
Tanner is asking, where do you think is the most affordable to purchase a pre-sale?
It's not townhomes in South Surrey. I would probably say, if you want, I'm going to focus that question in on two things, on transit-oriented developments or nodes near transit-oriented developments. And generally what I would say is the way that the prices have been appreciating around transit, New Westminster would have been that answer a year and a half to 2 years ago. It would have been $500 a square foot. It's now $625, $650 a square foot. So that's increasingly not the answer. I think, the parts of Coquitlam like Millardville, I think Surrey City Centre still has some tremendous value in terms of concrete pricing. Their average price is probably $475 to $500, and there's still room for lift there. All of those transit-oriented nodes will see significant appreciation, in my view, over the next 5 to 10 years. The other ones are near them locations. So, for instance, Port Coquitlam has a tremendous value right in the town center area. But it's still reasonable proximity to Coquitlam Centre and the SkyTrain, but you don't pay the SkyTrain premiums. The other one I'd watch on, but I think that area is going to lift in price very heavily, is Port Moody. Port Moody on the St. John side, but also in the Newport Village side. I think Port Moody is going to become the West Vancouver of the Tri-Cities. So if you're buying into those areas now in wood frame apartments or condominiums, I think you're going to see some pretty significant lift.
And the only other thing I'd like to add to that as well is that you also have to look at some of your opportunity costs. Is that, when Scott's saying that you are trying to stick to transit oriented, if you are sticking to the transit-oriented developments for value, you don't rely so much on your car. If your car insurance, car repairs, just that your general gas. So those are some of the things that you just have to look at your bottom dollar and say, hey, you know what? If you can cut down from a 2-car family down to a 1-car, that's money in your pocket, and that's going to really help in the long run for you as well.
Great. Just like we ended the other 2 sessions, we'll ask each of our panelists for one nugget for first time in home buyers. Wendy, why don't we start with you?
Well, I would really encourage people who are thinking of buying a home to check out the BC Housing website and make sure you understand if you're going to buy a new home or a home that's less than 10 years old, make sure you understand what your rights are under a policy of home warranty insurance, and check out the new homes registry to see exactly what you're looking to buy.
Thanks, Wendy. Derek?
On my end, I would say just do due diligence and seek professionals like a registered realtor as well as a mortgage broker. Before you go into your buying process, be honest with yourself. Be aware of the fact that this is probably going to be your largest investment in your entire life, unless you decide to buy a big yacht or something like that. But not a very good return on those. And what I take in consideration is be aware of what your buying power is. A lot of people will go out there and think, hey, they'll have their fix on X amount of a condo, X amount of townhome, but when they go to the mortgage broker, then go back and actually, you can't afford that. So they have champagne taste on a beer budget, and having that knowledge ahead of time is critical to actually really aid in your buying process.
I'd probably say there's a number of factors involved, but to sort of simplify it out to one that maybe people don't spend enough time on, and I can probably best make the point with a bit of a story, timing is very important. And so when you're buying a property, if you're worried about where the market's at today, I remember a young guy came to see me once who worked with us, and he was thinking about buying in Southeast Falls Creek, and he was worried about paying too much. And I said to him, well, let me ask you some questions. Rather than me telling you what to do, let me just ask you some questions. So I said to him, so do you really like the place? Yep. It's a good builder? Yep. How long do you think you'll live there? 3 to 5 years. I said, so if things happened in such a way that you couldn't sell it in 3 to 5 years for as much as you paid for it, what would you do? What do you mean? Could you be happy staying there for 3, 5, 7, 8, 10 years? Yeah, you know what? We could probably have kids there and be okay. So what you're telling me is sometime in the next 10 years, you think you could sell the home if you wanted to for more than you paid for it? He said, yeah. So I said, why are you hesitating on buying today for timing? And he bought the home. The home's now up about $200 or $300 a square foot. So when you buy, think through some of the worst things that could happen. And if you can stomach them in real estate, if you can hold through any kind of downturn we have, you'll almost always be okay. You'll also enjoy where you live. So I did ask him that. Would you appreciate living here for 7 or 8 years? He said, yeah, we could do that. So find a place you really enjoy living, because life's short, and be able to handle the timing if you had to sell. Don't put yourself in a position that if you had to sell, you don't like where you live. Okay?
Thanks, Scott. Before we close, just a reminder to fill out your condo card. It's your ticket for door prizes provided by 604 Trash It, Adira Developments, Bridgestone Financing Pros, Duxbury and Associates, Novell Design Build, RBC, and TELUS. Also, your survey card, your evaluation is in your kit, and you fill that out. You have a chance to win a $300 Home Depot gift certificate, and drop those off at the reception desk. And just a final thank you to our sponsors, the speaker sponsor, Canada Mortgage and Housing, Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, the Condominium Homeowners Association, and Fortis BC. Our media sponsors, the Vancouver Sun and Province, REW.ca, Black Press, Glacier Media, YP Next, YP Home, New Home and Condo Guide, and Shaw Communications. I'd like to thank the Greater Vancouver Home Builders for putting on this seminar and for you in attending. And just a final thank you to our third panel, Wendy, Derek, and Scott, for a job well done. And Wendy, Derek, and Scott will be around for a bit if you have any final questions for them. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your evening.